History was quietly being made at Women's College Hospital. The first sex reassignment surgery in Ontario was performed on a transgender.
What happens when Hollywood's biggest stars change their gender in front of the entire world? Once celebrated for who they were, the celebrities made the bold decision to transition, shocking fans' headlines and the industry itself. From fame to backlash, from silence to self-acceptance. This is a raw, then and now 2026 story that Hollywood never expected. Caitlyn Jenner. Before the world knew her as Caitlyn Jenner, she was Bruce Jenner, a symbol of strength, discipline, and American triumph. In 1976, Bruce stood on the Olympic podium in Montreal with a gold medal around his neck, celebrated as the greatest athlete on earth. To millions watching, he represented the ideal of masculinity, powerful, controlled, victorious, a national hero frozen forever in a moment of glory. Yet behind the applause and patriotic pride was a truth Caitlyn had carried since childhood. Long before fame and medals, Bruce felt drawn to femininity in ways she could neither explain nor escape. Small private moments, such as being fascinated by her mother's and sister's clothing, brought comfort mixed with deep confusion. In an era when gender identity was never openly discussed, those feelings were not just misunderstood, they were treated as forbidden. And so they were buried beneath silence, denial, and shame. Unable to live honestly, Bruce ran in the only direction that felt safe. Sports became an escape. Training offered control over chaos. Competition provided distraction from inner conflict. Winning became validation. Each victory felt like proof that if she could become the strongest man in the world, the voice inside might finally disappear. But no matter how loud the cheers grew, the truth never went silent. As fame followed her into adulthood, the conflict only deepened. Bruce built a life that looked complete from the outside, a husband, a father, a respected public figure admired by millions. Privately, the cost was devastating. Marriages ended not from a lack of love, but because the truth could not remain hidden forever. Attempts to share her struggle were often met with confusion or denial, leaving her feeling more isolated than before. Later, Bruce built a new family with Kris Jenner rising to global fame through Keeping Up with the Kardashians. To the public, Bruce appeared calm, stable, and dependable, the steady anchor of a famous and chaotic household. Behind closed doors, however, the pressure to maintain that image became unbearable. The more successful she became, the harder it was to breathe. Fame amplified the disguise, and the disguise became suffocating. By the age of 65, Bruce reached a breaking point. The choice was no longer between fear and change, but between survival and slow disappearance. Comfort was no longer enough. Stability could not replace truth. She stopped running. In 2015, she introduced herself to the world as Caitlyn Jenner through a historic Vanity Fair cover. The moment sent shockwaves across the globe. It shocked fans, divided opinions, and deeply affected her family. Criticism was loud, questions were endless, but something else happened as well. Conversations began, visibility expanded, and for the first time, Caitlyn felt aligned with herself. Caitlyn's journey was never about attention or fame. It was about freedom, about finally allowing her soul to live without disguise. Her story proves that no achievement can replace authenticity, and no finish line matters more than the moment you stop running from who you truly are. Gina Rosero. For years, Gina Rosero lived two lives. To the fashion world, she was a successful, confident model walking runways and booking campaigns. To herself, she was a woman carrying a secret powerful enough to end everything she had worked for. Gina's story began long before fame. At just 5 years old, she told her mother that she was a girl. Unlike many transgender children, Gina was met with love instead of rejection. Her family supported her, and by the age of 19, she had undergone gender affirmation surgery. Physically, her body finally matched her identity. But socially and professionally, fear took over. As her modeling career grew, Gina learned a hard rule of the industry. Visibility can be dangerous. She was advised to stay quiet to protect her image, to never let anyone know she was transgender. So she complied. She passed. She smiled. She succeeded. And she lived in constant fear that one question, one document, or one headline could destroy her career overnight. For years, Gina carried that weight alone. In 2014, standing on a TED stage, Gina made a decision that would change her life forever. In the middle of her talk, she revealed the truth she had hidden for decades. She came out publicly as a transgender woman. The moment was raw, emotional, and terrifying. She was not just telling her story. She was risking everything. What happened next surprised her. Instead of rejection, Gina received overwhelming support. Colleagues, agents, and friends stood by her, many admitting they had never known her past and that it changed nothing about who she was. For the first time, Gina felt free. The silence that once protected her had also imprisoned her. Coming out did not end her career, it transformed it. Gina became more than a model. She became an activist, using her platform to fight for transgender visibility, inclusion, and equal opportunity, especially within the fashion industry. She spoke openly about the harm of forcing transgender people to hide in order to survive, and the power of authenticity in reclaiming dignity. Gina Rosero's story is not about revealing a secret, it is about choosing honesty over fear and truth over comfort. She proved that visibility, while risky, can also be revolutionary. If Gina's courage moved you and you want to hear more real stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. Laverne Cox. Before the world applauded her talent and recognized her voice, Laverne Cox was simply a child trying to survive in a place that left little room for difference. Born and raised in Mobile, Alabama, she grew up in a deeply conservative environment where rigid gender roles, strict religious beliefs, and anything outside the norm were treated as threats. From a young age, Laverne knew she was different. She was drawn to softness, femininity, and self-expression, feelings that came naturally to her but were met with cruelty and rejection. School was never a safe place. Classmates quickly noticed that she did not conform, and teasing soon turned into relentless bullying. That bullying led to isolation, teaching Laverne early on that standing out could be dangerous. Every insult reinforced the same painful message that being herself was something that had to be hidden. At home and in church, the pressure to conform only intensified. Religion was used as a tool for correction rather than compassion, and shame slowly wrapped itself around her sense of self, shaping how she understood her own worth. Dance became Laverne's first escape. Through movement, she could express what words could not, a language beyond speech, a space where her body could exist freely. Although her mother feared judgment and social consequences, she allowed Laverne to take tap and jazz classes while carefully drawing the line at ballet, which she believed crossed too far into femininity. Even with those limits, dance gave Laverne moments of freedom, brief instances where she felt real, alive, and safe. But that freedom was fragile. Growing up surrounded by rejection and fear, Laverne began to believe that something was wrong with her. The weight of shame and self-hatred became unbearable. As a teenager, overwhelmed by despair, she attempted suicide. She survived, but the experience left a permanent scar. It was the darkest moment of her life, and also the moment that forced her to confront the truth. Survival itself became an act of defiance. Determined to live, Laverne made a life-changing decision. She left Alabama and moved to New York City, choosing possibility over fear. There she began a long and difficult transition, both physically and emotionally. Money was tight, acceptance was uncertain, but for the first time she was moving toward herself instead of running away. Her breakthrough came when she was cast as Sophia Bursay in Orange is the New Black. The role was more than a career milestone. It felt like a mirror. Sophia's story of identity struggle and humanity reflected Laverne's own life, and audiences around the world felt that truth. With that performance, Laverne did something revolutionary. She humanized the transgender experience for millions of people who had never truly seen it before. Fame did not soften her message, it sharpened it. Laverne became one of the most visible and powerful advocates for transgender rights, using her platform to speak openly about violence, discrimination, dignity, and representation. She refused to be reduced to a symbol, instead insisting on complexity, honesty, and humanity. Laverne Cox's story is not about overnight success, it is about endurance, about surviving long enough to be seen. And today, as she stands firmly in her truth, she reminds the world of a powerful reality. Being transgender is not a weakness, it is resilience made visible. Chanel West Coast. In the age of social media, a lie can travel faster than the truth ever could, multiplying with every click, share, and joke disguised as harmless entertainment. Few people understand this better than Chanel West Coast, a public figure who unexpectedly found herself at the center of one of the internet's strangest and most persistent rumors. The claim was bizarre, yet convincing enough for many to believe. According to online speculation, Chanel West Coast was supposedly Lee Norris, the actor best known for playing Stuart Minkus on the 1990s sitcom Boy Meets World, who had allegedly disappeared from Hollywood and later transitioned into Chanel. Side by side, photos, memes, and amateur investigations fueled the theory, spreading it as a joke that slowly took on the weight of rumor and misinformation. The truth, however, was simple. Chanel West Coast and Lee Norris are two entirely different people with separate lives, careers, and histories. Yet simplicity does not stop the internet. The rumor caused real consequences. For Lee Norris, it created confusion about his career, with many believing he had vanished from the industry. In reality, he continued acting, appearing in projects such as Gone Girl and various television roles. For Chanel, the rumor became a disturbing reminder of how casually the internet treats identity, especially gender identity, as entertainment. Instead of responding with anger, sarcasm, or public outrage, Chanel chose a different approach. She responded with empathy. Chanel publicly expressed sympathy for Lee Norris, acknowledging how unfair it was for his work and career to be overshadowed by a false narrative he never asked for. More importantly, she addressed the deeper issue behind the rumor. Transgender identity, she emphasized, is not a punchline. It is not a meme. It is a deeply personal journey that involves real physical, emotional, and psychological challenges. Chanel made it clear that while rumors may appear harmless to outsiders, they can reinforce harmful stereotypes and disrespect real transgender people who have fought hard for the right to live authentically. Her response stood out in a digital culture often driven by mockery and outrage. Calm, thoughtful, and grounded, she chose responsibility over reaction. Despite the noise, Chanel West Coast did not allow the rumor to define her. She continued building her career in television, music, and public appearances, maintaining focus and momentum. Her resilience did not come from confrontation, but from clarity. She understood that sometimes the most powerful response is refusing to let misinformation shape your identity. Chanel West Coast's story is not about transition. It is about accountability. It is about recognizing that words matter, jokes carry weight, and rumors have consequences far beyond the screen. In a world where clicks often matter more than truth, her response serves as a reminder that empathy is still a choice, and responsibility is still possible. Fallon Fox. In a world where strength is measured by force and masculinity is rarely questioned, Fallon Fox stepped into one of the harshest arenas imaginable. Mixed martial arts is not just a sport, it is a test of dominance, endurance, and pain. And for Fallon, the fight was never limited to the cage. Born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, Fallon knew from an early age that she was different. She felt more comfortable around girls and more aligned with femininity, yet trapped inside expectations she did not choose. In a society that demanded conformity, those feelings became a source of fear and confusion she carried in silence. When Fallon finally came out to her parents as transgender, the reaction was devastating. Her mother struggled to accept the truth while her father refused to believe it, insisting she could be changed. What followed was conversion therapy, a widely discredited practice that left deep emotional scars. Instead of support, Fallon was taught to doubt her own identity. But doubt could not erase truth. Despite family rejection and social pressure, Fallon made a defining decision. She chose to transition, knowing it could cost her relationships stability and safety. The journey was isolating and painful, but it was necessary. For the first time, Fallon was moving toward herself. After transitioning, Fallon did the unthinkable. She entered professional MMA and made history as the first openly transgender athlete to. The backlash was immediate. Critics accused her of having an unfair advantage. Strangers questioned her right to compete. Her identity became a public debate discussed by people who had never met her and never stepped into a cage. The hardest blows did not come from opponents but from perception. Before coming out, Fallon was simply an athlete. Afterward, she was reduced to controversy. Respect turned into suspicion. Achievement turned into argument. Still, Fallon refused to walk away. Every fight became more than a match, it became a statement. A declaration that transgender athletes deserve dignity, fairness, and a place in sports. Fallon Fox's story is not just about fighting, it is about resilience, courage, and refusing to disappear. Inside the cage, she faces opponents. Outside it, she challenges a system that questions her existence, and she continues to stand her ground. To stand her ground. To stand her ground. To stand her ground. Chanel West Coast. In the age of social media, a lie can travel faster than the truth ever could, multiplying with every click, share, and joke disguised as harmless entertainment. Few people understand this better than Chanel West Coast, a public figure who unexpectedly found herself at the center of one of the internet's strangest and most persistent rumors. The claim was bizarre, yet convincing enough for many to believe. According to online speculation, Chanel West Coast was supposedly Lee Norris, the actor best known for playing Stuart Minkus on the 1990s sitcom Boy Meets World, who had allegedly disappeared from Hollywood and later transitioned into Chanel. Side by side, photos, memes, and amateur investigations fueled the theory, spreading it as a joke that slowly took on the weight of rumor and misinformation. The truth, however, was simple. Chanel West Coast and Lee Norris are two entirely different people with separate lives, careers, and histories. Yet simplicity does not stop the internet. The rumor caused real consequences. For Lee Norris, it created confusion about his career, with many believing he had vanished from the industry. In reality, he continued acting, appearing in projects such as Gone Girl and various television roles. For Chanel, the rumor became a disturbing reminder of how casually the internet treats identity, especially gender identity, as entertainment. Instead of responding with anger, sarcasm, or public outrage, Chanel chose a different approach. She responded with empathy. Chanel publicly expressed sympathy for Lee Norris, acknowledging how unfair it was for his work and career to be overshadowed by a false narrative he never asked for. More importantly, she addressed the deeper issue behind the rumor. Transgender identity, she emphasized, is not a punchline. It is not a meme. It is a deeply personal journey that involves real physical, emotional, and psychological challenges. Laverne Cox. Some stars are manufactured by studios. Others are forged in resistance. Laverne Cox belongs to the latter. Born in Mobile, Alabama, she grew up in the Deep South at a time and in a place where difference often drew scrutiny instead of celebration. As a child who would later identify as transgender, she has spoken about isolation, bullying, and the quiet ache of feeling misaligned with the expectations placed upon her. Before Hollywood knew her name, she was already navigating a world that questioned her existence, learning resilience long before recognition. Education and performance became her refuge. Theater offered structure, storytelling offered control. In classrooms and rehearsal spaces, Laverne refined not only her craft, but her sense of purpose. She understood that visibility could be more than personal affirmation. It could become social intervention. Yet the entertainment industry she was preparing to enter had rarely made room for openly transgender women in complex roles. The barriers were real, but so was her determination. That determination crystallized when she was cast as Sophia Bursay in Netflix's groundbreaking series Orange is the New Black. Sophia was a transgender woman navigating incarceration, motherhood, and survival with intelligence and emotional depth. Through Laverne's performance, the character transcended stereotype. She was not presented as spectacle or cautionary tale, but as human, layered, flawed, compassionate. Audiences who had never before encountered a nuanced portrayal of a transgender woman were suddenly confronted with one in prime time. In 2014, Laverne Cox became the first openly transgender person nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award in an acting category. The milestone carried symbolic weight far beyond a single performance. It marked a visible crack in an industry long criticized for exclusion. That same year, her appearance on the cover of Time magazine under the headline, "The Transgender Tipping Point," captured a cultural shift already underway. The image traveled globally, positioning her not only as an actress, but as a figure emblematic of broader social change. Yet Laverne's influence did not rest on accolades. She consistently used her platform to address healthcare discrimination, employment inequality, and the disproportionate violence faced by transgender women, particularly women of color. In interviews and speeches, she blended personal narrative with policy awareness, transforming celebrity into advocacy. Her message remained clear: representation is not a trend, but a necessity tied to dignity and safety. Laverne Cox's journey illustrates how authenticity can reshape institutions. From a childhood marked by misunderstanding to international recognition and cultural leadership, her trajectory reflects endurance anchored in purpose. She did not dilute her identity to fit the industry. She expanded the industry's capacity to recognize her. Through talent, visibility, and unwavering commitment to truth, she helped move conversations once confined to the margins into the center of mainstream discourse, proving that when courage meets opportunity, culture itself begins to evolve. Caitlyn Jenner. In the blazing summer of 1976, beneath the roaring sky of Montreal's Olympic Stadium, Bruce Jenner stood crowned in gold, the ultimate American champion. The decathlon victory was more than a medal, it was mythology in motion. He was strength carved into flesh discipline, wrapped in red, white, and blue, a face that appeared on cereal boxes and television screens as the embodiment of masculine triumph. At a time when the United States was searching for heroes, Bruce Jenner felt like certainty itself, unshakable, invincible, and perfectly aligned with the image the nation wanted to see. But legends often demand silence in exchange for applause. Behind the polished interviews and endorsement deals, there was, by Caitlyn's later account, a private reality unfolding in the shadows. In her memoir, The Secrets of My Life, she described a lifelong internal struggle, a quiet and persistent truth that never dissolved under stadium lights. While the public celebrated the triumph of a male athletic icon, she has said she was wrestling internally with an identity that did not match the role she was living. It was a double existence shaped by expectation and restraint, where global fame stood in sharp contrast to a deeply personal conflict that could not easily be spoken in the era that made her famous. For decades, the world continued to see the image it had always known. Bruce Jenner evolved into a familiar presence in American pop culture, eventually entering reality television and expanding his celebrity far beyond sports. Yet the tension between public persona and private truth, as she later revealed, never fully disappeared. It lingered beneath interviews, behind smiles, inside carefully constructed appearances that functioned like armor. Then in 2015, nearly 40 years after the gold medal that defined a generation, the silence gave way to revelation. In a nationally televised interview with Diane Sawyer, Caitlyn Jenner publicly came out as transgender, a moment that reverberated far beyond entertainment headlines. The announcement marked not only a personal declaration, but also a cultural shift, forcing mainstream America to confront conversations about authenticity, identity, and the hidden cost of living unseen. Soon after the docuseries I Am Kate opened a window into her daily life, portraying transition not as spectacle, but as a journey marked by vulnerability, uncertainty, and resolve. Caitlyn Jenner's story became one of reinvention, not in pursuit of fame, but in pursuit of honesty. The Olympic champion, who once symbolized physical endurance, revealed another form of strength, one measured not in seconds or points, but in the willingness to step into the light after decades in shadow. Her transformation reframed her legacy, suggesting that the most profound victories are not always won before roaring crowds, but in the quiet, difficult decision to finally live without disguise. After Caitlyn Jenner's journey, was her greatest win Olympic gold or living her truth? Comment 1 for truth, comment 0 for gold. Andrea Pejich. There are moments in fashion history when a single face disrupts decades of certainty. Andrea Pejich was one of those moments. Born in Tuzla, Bosnia in 1991, her earliest years were shaped not by glamour but by conflict. As war fractured her homeland, her family fled, eventually rebuilding their lives in Australia. The runway was not destiny written at birth. It was a distant possibility emerging from displacement, resilience, and reinvention. Long before couture houses would compete for her presence, survival itself was the first chapter of her story. By her late teens, Andrea possessed a look the industry could not categorize. Delicate yet angular, soft yet striking, she moved through castings with an aura that unsettled traditional definitions. In 2011, she achieved what few models had dared to attempt at the highest level, walking major runways in both menswear and womenswear collections. One night, she embodied sharp, tailored masculinity. The next, she floated through gowns designed to celebrate femininity. The effect was electric. Editors debated. Designers recalibrated. Audiences stared, sensing that something fundamental in fashion's rigid binary had just shifted. At the time, mainstream conversations about gender fluidity were still limited. Yet Andrea's presence on international magazine covers and in global campaigns quietly challenged the architecture of beauty itself. She was frequently described as androgynous, a word that both captured and confined her. The industry celebrated the aesthetic ambiguity, but beneath the surface, her personal journey toward clarity continued. Public fascination grew, yet the deeper truth remained hers to define. In 2014, Andrea publicly came out as a transgender woman, marking a profound turning point. The announcement reframed the narrative that had surrounded her rise. What had once been marketed as mystery became authenticity. She spoke about identity with composure, emphasizing that her evolution was not a trend but a reality long understood internally. The following year, she made history again as the first openly transgender model to front a major cosmetics campaign with Makeup Forever. The symbolism resonated globally. A transgender woman representing a beauty brand at the highest commercial level signaled more than inclusion, it suggested transformation. Despite the polished editorials and high fashion acclaim, Andrea has acknowledged the vulnerability inherent in living openly within an industry that commodifies image. Her journey illustrates the tension between being celebrated for difference and being fully understood. Yet she continued forward, building a career that balanced modeling with advocacy and public conversation about identity and acceptance. Andrea Pahich did more than walk runways. She altered the lens through which fashion views gender. From refugee child to international model, from ambiguity to self-defined womanhood, her trajectory embodies reinvention without erasure. In a world that once relied on strict categories, she stood as living proof that beauty evolves, expands, and ultimately belongs to those bold enough to claim it openly. Janet Mock. Before the publishing deals, before Hollywood contracts and standing ovations, there was a young girl in Hawaii searching for language to describe herself in a world that rarely offered it. Janet Mock grew up navigating poverty, instability, and the quiet ache of feeling unseen. As a transgender girl of color, she has spoken about wrestling with belonging from an early age, moving through adolescence with both fierce determination and fragile hope. The world around her often misunderstood what it refused to understand, and yet she refused to let those limitations script her future. Transitioning during her teenage years required courage long before cameras or headlines ever appeared. Education became her pathway forward, storytelling her instrument of survival. Janet understood something powerful. If society distorted transgender lives, then the most radical act was to tell the story herself. In 2014, she released her memoir, Redefining Realness, a book that did more than recount personal milestones. It exposed vulnerability, poverty, ambition, and identity with unflinching honesty. The memoir resonated far beyond literary circles, becoming a cultural touchstone for readers who had rarely encountered such openness from a transgender woman of color. But Janet's influence did not stop on the printed page. She moved into television with the same strategic clarity that defined her writing. As a writer, director, and executive producer on the acclaimed series Pose, she helped center Black and Latinx transgender communities within mainstream storytelling. Set against the vibrant yet often overlooked ballroom culture of 1980s New York, the show did not reduce its characters to symbols. It honored them as dreamers, lovers, survivors. Janet made history as the first transgender woman of color hired as a writer for a major television series, quietly redrawing the boundaries of who gets to shape narratives in Hollywood. In 2019, she broke another barrier by signing an overall deal with Netflix, becoming the first trans woman of color to secure such an agreement. The milestone signaled more than career advancement. It marked institutional recognition of a voice once pushed to the margins. Through interviews and public appearances, Janet has consistently emphasized that representation without authorship is incomplete. Visibility matters, but control over the narrative transforms culture. Janet Mock's journey is not framed by scandal or spectacle. It is defined by authorship intention and an unwavering belief that truth, when spoken clearly, can dismantle silence. She did not wait to be interpreted by others. She wrote herself into history, ensuring that stories once ignored would be documented with dignity and depth. In an industry built on scripted illusions, Janet chose authenticity as her most powerful plot twist, proving that when marginalized voices seize the pen, the story of an entire era can begin to change. If Janet Mock's journey inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us as we uncover the stories Hollywood never told. Michaela J. Rodriguez Long. Before history attached itself to her name, there was a young artist in Newark who understood that the stage could become a sanctuary. Michaela J. Rodriguez did not stumble into performance. She gravitated toward it with intention, as if music and theater were the only places where her full self could breathe without hesitation. While the world outside negotiated categories and expectations, she immersed herself in craft training in musical theater and refining a voice that carried both strength and vulnerability in equal measure. Her early appearance in the off-Broadway production of Rent signaled more than talent. It revealed emotional fluency, a performer capable of translating personal depth into universal resonance. After publicly coming out as a transgender woman, MJ continued forward with disciplined focus, aware that Hollywood had rarely imagined someone like her at the center of a dramatic narrative. The industry's limitations were clear, but so was her resolve. That turning point arrived with the FX series Pose, a show that illuminated New York's 1980s ballroom culture and placed transgender women of color at the heart of its storytelling. Cast as Blanca Rodriguez Evangelista, MJ embodied a character defined not by tragedy, but by leadership and compassion. Blanca was a house mother, a mentor, a woman forging family from fragments. Through subtle gestures and emotionally grounded performances, MJ infused the role with dignity that felt lived in rather than performed. Viewers were not asked to observe her from a distance. They were invited to understand her. Recognition followed with historic weight. In 2021, MJ Rodriguez became the first transgender woman nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series. The nomination alone marked a rupture in long-standing industry norms. In 2022, she advanced that milestone by winning the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Television Drama, becoming the first transgender actress to claim the honor. The achievement resonated beyond personal success, signaling that excellence could no longer be separated from inclusion. Outside of award ceremonies, MJ has continued shaping culture through music, public speaking, and advocacy. She emphasizes opportunity over tokenism and authenticity over spectacle, reminding audiences that representation must extend beyond visibility into meaningful participation. Her career illustrates a quiet but powerful shift, talent meeting readiness, at the precise moment culture begins to evolve. MJ Rodriguez did not alter Hollywood through provocation. She did so through artistry executed with precision and heart. By inhabiting her roles fully and living her truth openly, she expanded what leading lady presence can look like. In doing so, she reframed not only her own narrative but the expectations of an industry learning perhaps slowly to see more clearly. Gigi Gorgeous. In the early days of YouTube, when the platform still felt like a digital diary rather than a global empire, a charismatic teenager from Montreal began speaking directly into a camera. The lighting was simple, the backdrop unremarkable, but the personality was magnetic. Gigi Gorgeous entered the online world with glamour humor and a fascination with beauty culture. Viewers initially came for makeup tutorials and fashion commentary. Yet as subscriber counts climbed into the millions, the channel began to shift in tone. Behind the lip gloss and styling tips, a deeper narrative was forming. In 2013, Gigi publicly shared that she was transitioning. The announcement did not arrive wrapped in corporate polish. It unfolded in real time through emotional uploads that captured uncertainty, relief, fear, and determination. Unlike traditional celebrities whose transformations are filtered through press releases, Gigi allowed her audience to witness vulnerability without a buffer. The response was immediate and global. Support poured in alongside curiosity and misunderstanding. But what distinguished Gigi's journey was her refusal to retreat. She continued documenting medical milestones, personal reflections, and evolving self-confidence, turning what could have been a private evolution into a shared narrative of resilience. Her platform transformed from lifestyle entertainment into a living archive of identity and motion. In 2017, her story expanded beyond the confines of a laptop screen with the documentary This Is Everything, Gigi Gorgeous, directed by Academy Award-winning filmmaker Barbara Koppel. The film revealed the layered reality of online fame where public adoration and personal growth coexist under constant visibility. It portrayed not only the glamour of influence but the emotional complexity of becoming oneself while millions watch. Outside the digital sphere, Gigi embraced advocacy with increasing clarity. She spoke about transgender rights inclusion and the importance of self-determination in interviews and public appearances. Her 2019 marriage to designer and activist Nats Getty symbolized another chapter, one rooted in partnership and public affirmation rather than secrecy. It marked a shift from internet personality to fully realized public figure. Gigi Gorgeous did not emerge from Hollywood casting calls or television auditions. She built her influence from a bedroom camera and unfiltered honesty. By choosing transparency over concealment, she demonstrated that authenticity can flourish even in the most exposed environments. Her journey reflects a new kind of stardom, one where transformation is not hidden behind studio doors but shared openly frame by frame with the world watching. India Moore. Not every star rises from comfort. Some are forged in instability, sharpened by rejection, and propelled forward by sheer will. India Moore's story begins in the Bronx, New York, where early life was marked by tension and misunderstanding. As a transgender and non-binary youth, India has spoken about feeling out of place in environments that struggled to accept difference. By the age of 14, they left home navigating periods of homelessness while still trying to hold on to fragments of ambition. Survival was not abstract. It was daily, immediate, and unforgiving. Modeling became both refuge and resistance. What began as a means of sustaining themselves gradually transformed into a pathway toward visibility. Designers noticed India's striking presence, a blend of softness and strength that defied easy categorization. Runways that once seemed unreachable opened, and fashion houses began to recognize a face that carried not just beauty but narrative. Each appearance challenged assumptions about who belonged in high fashion and who did not. The defining shift arrived with the FX series Pose, a drama centered on New York's ballroom culture of the 1980s and 1990s. Cast as Angel Evangelista, a young transgender woman navigating love, ambition, and survival, India delivered a performance layered with vulnerability and quiet resolve. Angel was not reduced to stereotype. She was allowed complexity, desire, heartbreak, and hope. Through subtle expression and emotional nuance, India brought humanity to a character who reflected real histories long overlooked by mainstream media. Recognition followed with symbolic weight. In 2019, India Moore was named to Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people, a milestone that signaled cultural acknowledgement beyond entertainment circles. That same year, they made history as the first openly transgender and non-binary person to model for a Louis Vuitton campaign. The imagery resonated globally, suggesting a fashion industry gradually confronting its own limitations. Yet influence for India has never been confined to aesthetics. They have consistently used their platform to address systemic inequality, healthcare discrimination, and the urgent need to protect transgender and non-binary communities. Public statements and interviews carry a tone of urgency shaped by lived experience rather than theory. Advocacy is not performance, it is continuity. India Moore's journey illustrates how visibility can evolve into agency. From instability in adolescence to international campaigns and critical acclaim, the trajectory reflects resilience anchored in authenticity. In every role, every photograph, and every public stance, India reinforces a central truth: representation becomes transformative when it is rooted in lived reality rather than surface inclusion. Simon Cowell. For decades, Simon Cowell has been the sharp silhouette behind the judge's table, the man whose raised eyebrow could launch or end a career in seconds. As the driving force behind global franchises like The X Factor and America's Got Talent, he built a reputation on precision, blunt honesty, and an almost surgical instinct for talent. His image was unmistakable, tailored shirts, controlled smirk, the embodiment of entertainment authority in its most polished form. But in recent years, it was not a critique of a contestant that captured headlines. It was his own reflection. Viewers began noticing dramatic changes in his appearance, prompting widespread speculation about cosmetic procedures. The conversation spread quickly across tabloids and social media, dissecting Angle's expressions and the subtle shifts of a familiar face. In an industry that quietly worships youth, Simon eventually addressed the speculation himself, revealing that he had chosen to dissolve several facial fillers after realizing he had gone too far in his attempt to preserve a younger look. The admission was disarmingly candid. He acknowledged that in chasing quick cosmetic solutions, he had momentarily drifted from balance. What followed was not scandal but recalibration. He began focusing on health, nutrition, and overall wellness rather than surface-level adjustments. The transformation that unfolded afterward appeared less about aesthetics and more about intention. For someone who built a career evaluating others, confronting his own image publicly required a different kind of vulnerability. Aging within the spotlight of global television is a peculiar pressure, especially in an industry that monetizes appearance as much as talent. By openly discussing his decision to step back from cosmetic excess, Simon reframed the narrative. The conversation shifted from speculation to self-awareness, from ridicule to reflect. His journey became less about procedures and more about perspective. After years operating in a high-pressure environment where presentation often equaled power, he chose moderation over illusion. The shift suggested a broader acknowledgement that confidence cannot be manufactured indefinitely. Simon Cowell's story does not center on reinvention of identity, but on recalibration of priorities. In a culture that rewards relentless youthfulness, his decision to embrace a more natural evolution stands as a quiet statement. It underscores a truth rarely spoken in entertainment circles: real authority is sustained not by resisting time at all costs, but by adapting with clarity, discipline, and an acceptance that change, when handled honestly, can become its own form of. After Simon Cowell faced the mirror and chose change. Tell me this, how much battery is left on your phone right now? Drop your percent in the comments. Elliot Page. There are moments in Hollywood when a young actor arrives and instantly alters the atmosphere. In 2007, with the release of Juno, Elliot Page delivered a performance so sharp and emotionally precise that it felt effortless, almost inevitable. The Oscar nomination that followed turned him into one of the most talked-about talents of his generation. He wasn't loud nor manufactured for spectacle. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and quietly magnetic. The industry embraced him as a symbol of modern storytelling, and the public saw a rising star whose future seemed limitless. Success expanded quickly. Roles in major productions like Inception positioned him within blockbuster territory while preserving his reputation for depth. Red carpets, international press tours, and critical acclaim became routine. From the outside, his trajectory appeared smooth and controlled, the kind of career arc carefully designed by Hollywood itself. Yet behind the precision of interviews and the composure of public appearances, there were hints of strain. In later reflections, Page would speak about discomfort with how he was perceived, describing a growing dissonance between the person audiences applauded and the identity he privately understood. In December 2020, that private understanding became public. Elliot Page announced that he is transgender, sharing his truth in a statement that resonated worldwide. The response was immediate, both supportive and historic. The revelation did not dismantle his career, it reframed it. Instead of retreating from visibility, he stepped further into it, becoming one of the most recognizable transgender men in mainstream entertainment. His appearance on the cover of Time magazine in 2021 solidified that cultural shift, presenting him not as a controversy, but as a figure of clarity and resilience. Professionally, the transition unfolded with notable continuity. On Netflix's The Umbrella Academy, his character evolved into Victor Hargreaves, with the series integrating the change organically into its storyline. Rather than avoiding the subject, the show acknowledged it, reflecting an industry learning to adapt to authenticity. Page continued acting, producing and advocating, demonstrating that artistic credibility and personal truth need not exist in conflict. Elliot Page's journey illustrates a rare kind of courage within an industry built on image management. He had already secured critical acclaim and commercial success before revealing his identity, making the decision one rooted in alignment rather than ambition. By choosing transparency over comfort, he reshaped not only his public narrative but also the possibilities for others navigating similar paths. His legacy now carries two dimensions: a body of compelling performances and a lived example of self-determination in the most visible spotlight imaginable. If these stories left you speechless, don't just watch in silence. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next hidden chapter from behind Hollywood's brightest lights. The spotlight never tells the whole story, and we're just getting started, and we're just getting started, and we're just getting started. Simon Cowell. For decades, Simon Cowell has been the sharp silhouette behind the judge's table, the man whose raised eyebrow could launch or end a career in seconds. As the driving force behind global franchises like The X Factor and America's Got Talent, he built a reputation on precision, blunt honesty, and an almost surgical instinct for talent. His image was unmistakable, tailored shirts, controlled smirk, the embodiment of entertainment authority in its most polished form. But in recent years, it was not a critique of a contestant that captured headlines. It was his own reflection. Viewers began noticing dramatic changes in his appearance, prompting widespread speculation about cosmetic procedures. The conversation spread quickly across tabloids and social media, dissecting angles, expressions, and the subtle shifts of a familiar face. In an industry that quietly worships youth, Simon eventually addressed the speculation himself, revealing that he had chosen to dissolve several facial fillers after realizing he had gone too far in his attempt to preserve a younger look. The admission was disarmingly candid. He acknowledged that in chasing quick cosmetic solutions, he had momentarily drifted from balance. What followed was not scandal but recalibration. He began focusing on health, nutrition, and overall wellness rather than surface-level adjustments. The transformation that unfolded afterward appeared less about aesthetics and more about intention. For someone who built a career evaluating others, confronting his own image publicly required a different kind of vulnerability. Aging within the spotlight of global television is a peculiar pressure, especially in an industry that monetizes appearance as much as talent. By openly discussing his decision to step back from cosmetic excess, Simon reframed the narrative. The conversation shifted from speculation to self-awareness, from ridicule to reflect. His journey became less about procedures and more about perspective. After years operating in a high-pressure environment where presentation often equaled power, he chose moderation over illusion. The shift suggested a broader acknowledgement that confidence cannot be manufactured indefinitely. Simon Cowell's story does not center on reinvention of identity, but on recalibration of priorities. In a culture that rewards relentless youthfulness, his decision to embrace a more natural evolution stands as a quiet statement. It underscores a truth rarely spoken in entertainment circles: real authority is sustained not by resisting time at all costs, but by adapting with clarity, discipline, and an acceptance that change, when handled honestly, can become its own form of. After Simon Cowell faced the mirror and chose change. Tell me this: how much battery is left on your phone right now? Drop your percent in the comments. Chaz Bono. Behind the glittering lights of Hollywood, where fame often hides the truth behind carefully crafted images, lies the powerful and deeply human story of Chaz Bono. It is the story of a man who spent decades living according to expectations imposed by others before finally finding the courage to live for himself. Born in 1969 as Chastity, he was the only child of two cultural icons, Cher and Sonny Bono. From the outside, his life appeared charmed. Red carpets, television appearances, and constant media attention surrounded him from childhood. Yet behind that polished image was a child quietly wrestling with an identity he did not yet have the words to explain. From a very early age, Chastity felt profoundly disconnected from the feminine role the world expected her to embrace, feeling trapped in a body that never truly felt like home. As the years passed, that discomfort only grew heavier. He tried to follow society's expectations, believing that fitting in might bring peace or clarity. Instead, it brought confusion, isolation, and emotional pain. Fear became a constant presence. Fear of rejection, fear of disappointing his family, fear of losing love. To survive, Chastity learned to stay silent, maintaining a public image that pleased the world while privately battling deep emotional turmoil. For years, survival meant pretending. By the late 2000s, pretending was no longer possible. The cost of silence had become too great. Chastity stepped forward and introduced himself to the world as Chaz Bono. It was not a moment of celebration or applause, but one of immense courage filled with doubt, fear, and vulnerability. At the age of 40, Chaz began his physical transition, including medical procedures and testosterone therapy. His voice deepened, his appearance changed, and for the first time, his reflection began to align with who he had always known himself to be. Even today, Chaz has admitted that looking at old photographs of Chastity can be painful reminders of years spent living in a body that never truly belonged to him. But Chaz did not allow his journey to remain only personal. He transformed his struggle into purpose. Using his visibility, he became a vocal advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, speaking openly about identity acceptance and the cost of silence. He also followed his parents into the entertainment world, breaking barriers as the first openly transgender man to play a male role in a feature film. His appearances in major television series, including American Horror Story, challenged Hollywood to see him not as a symbol, but as an actor, a professional, and a man in his own right. The transition was not difficult only for Chaz. It was also a profound adjustment for his mother, Cher. She has openly shared how challenging it was to let go of the image of her daughter and embrace her son. While the transition required time and learning, her love and pride in Chaz never wavered. Their relationship became a public example of how love can evolve even when understanding takes time. Chaz Bono's story is not a fairy tale with an effortless ending. It is a story of loss, courage, and rebirth. In a world built on appearances and expectations, Chaz chose honesty over comfort. His journey stands as a reminder that the bravest act is not becoming famous, but becoming true to yourself even when the cost is high. Jazz Jennings. For most children, growing up happens quietly, protected within family walls and school hallways. For Jazz Jennings, childhood unfolded under the gaze of the entire world. From a very young age, Jazz knew exactly who she was. Despite being born with a body the world labeled male, she consistently and confidently identified as a girl. There was no confusion in her mind, only frustration that her outer appearance did not reflect the truth she felt inside. As a small child, Jazz gravitated toward dresses, makeup, and high heels borrowed from her sister's closet. These choices were not acts of rebellion, they were expressions of identity. When adults referred to her as a boy, Jazz corrected them without fear or hesitation. In her innocent logic, she believed that one day something magical would happen, that her body would finally match who she already knew herself to be. What made Jazz's story remarkable was not only her clarity, but the response of her family. Instead of silencing her, they listened. Instead of forcing her to conform, they believed her. Their love became her shield in a world that often responds to difference with cruelty. At just 6 years old, Jazz came out publicly in an interview with Barbara Walters, becoming one of the youngest transgender children to do so on national television. That moment changed her life forever. Visibility brought understanding and support, but it also brought hatred, judgment, and relentless scrutiny. Jazz did not simply grow up, she grew up under expectation, debate, and constant public attention long before she was old enough to fully understand the weight of it. As she entered her teenage years, Jazz continued to share her journey through the TLC reality series I Am Jazz. Cameras followed her through school friendships, body image struggles, mental health challenges, and complex medical decisions. Every milestone became public. Every setback became a lesson observed by millions. Growing up is difficult for any child. Growing up as a symbol for an entire community is something few could endure. Despite the pressure, Jazz never lost her voice. She spoke openly about anxiety, self-doubt, and the emotional cost of constant visibility. She also became a powerful advocate for transgender rights and youth acceptance, reminding the world that identity is not something chosen for attention, but something deeply known. In 2014, she was named one of Time magazine's most influential teens, not because of fame, but because of courage. When asked how she handles judgment, Jazz answered with clarity beyond her years. The only opinion that truly matters is her own, because she gets to define herself. Jazz Jennings' story is not about perfection. It is about honesty, resilience, and the bravery it takes to grow up authentically in a world still learning how to listen. If you had known who you truly were at such a young age, would you have had the courage to speak up like Jazz? Let us know in the comments. Andreja Pejic. In the ruthless world of high fashion, where beauty is currency and difference can be both a gift and a risk, few stories are as striking as that of Andreja Pejic. Long before she became a symbol of authenticity, Andrea was known for something the industry rarely named out loud. She was genderless. Designers were captivated. Cameras adored her sharp features and delicate elegance. She walked women's runways with effortless grace, blurring boundaries others were afraid to touch. From the outside, success seemed to come easily, but behind the applause was a quiet struggle that began long before fame. Born in Bosnia and raised in Australia, Andrea grew up feeling different in ways she could not explain. As a child, she was drawn to things society labeled feminine makeup dresses and gentle moments shared with her mother. These moments felt natural yet dangerous because the world had rules and boys were not meant to feel this way. As she entered her teenage years, her appearance became increasingly unconventional. People stared, some admired, others mocked. Bullying and isolation followed, leaving scars that success could not erase. Fashion became her refuge, the one place where difference was not punished but praised. And within that space, her career soared. Still, fame could not fill the emptiness she carried. For years, the thought of transitioning lived silently in her mind. It was not just a medical choice. It meant risking everything she had built: her career, her relationships, and her place in an industry that loved her precisely as she was, or rather as it wanted her to be. But living a lie has an expiration date. In 2014, Andrea made the decision that changed her life forever. She chose herself. The transition was neither quick nor glamorous. It required psychological evaluations, medical preparation, and enormous emotional strength. It demanded patience, courage, and a willingness to face uncertainty. When Andrea finally stepped into the world as her true self, many expected her career to end. Instead, it reached new heights. She made history as the first openly transgender model to appear on the cover of GQ Portugal. What once seemed like a risk became a symbol of progress. Andrea was no longer just a face on the runway. She became proof that authenticity does not weaken beauty, it gives it depth. Andrea Pejic's story is not simply about transition. It is about choosing truth over comfort, identity over expectation, and courage over fear. In an industry built on illusion, she chose to be real. Carmen Carrera. Before fashion runways and advocacy headlines, Carmen Carrera first stepped into the public spotlight under the bright competitive lights of RuPaul's Drag Race. Her beauty confidence and magnetic charisma immediately set her apart. Week after week, audiences were drawn to her presence. To many viewers, Carmen was a standout drag performer with star potential. But to Carmen herself, that stage was only the beginning of a much deeper and more personal reckoning. After leaving the show, Carmen reached a turning point that would redefine her life. She chose to begin her transition and live openly as the woman she had always known herself to be. It was a decision rooted in honesty, but the response she received was far from welcoming. Instead of applause, she was met with resistance. Many fans and even members of the drag community struggled to separate drag as performance from gender identity as lived reality. To them, Carmen was still viewed as a man in costume. To Carmen, that misunderstanding cut deeply, reducing her existence to an illusion rather than a truth. Her transition forced an uncomfortable but necessary conversation into the public eye. Drag is art, gender identity is not. Carmen refused to let the two be blurred when she openly criticized language used on Drag Race that she believed disrespected transgender women. Backlash followed swiftly. She was accused of being ungrateful, of betraying the community that helped launch her career, and of demanding too much. But Carmen did not back down. Respect, she argued, should never be conditional on silence. Rather than retreating, Carmen chose to move forward. She transformed visibility into purpose, stepping into the fashion world as a model. She walked international runways, appeared in major campaigns, and challenged outdated ideas of beauty and womanhood with every appearance. Carmen was no longer asking for permission to exist. She was claiming her space unapologetically. Beyond modeling, Carmen became a vocal advocate for transgender rights. She used her platform to confront misconceptions head-on, emphasizing that being transgender is not a performance, not a trend, and not a topic for casual debate. It is a lived reality shaped by courage, vulnerability, and the constant demand to be seen as human. Her voice added nuance to conversations often dominated by stereotypes and simplifications. Despite the controversy that followed her, Carmen has repeatedly said she carries no hatred. Growth, she believes, comes through conversation, not cancellation. Her journey is not driven by conflict, but by clarity. It is about reclaiming identity in a world eager to define it for you, and choosing dignity even when that choice costs applause. Carmen Carrera's story is not just about transition. It is about self-respect, about standing still when the world demands explanations, and about proving that authenticity, even when uncomfortable, is always worth the price. If you believe Carmen was right to choose her true identity over public approval, comment 1. If you think she should have stayed silent to protect her career, comment 0.
How many hours a day do you wear the corset?
Almost all day.
Does this hurt?
No.
Do you have any trouble breathing when I do this?
No.
This is not just about beauty, it's about choices that permanently changed lives. Some celebrities turn to plastic surgery out of insecurity, others because of fame, pressure, or obsession. Their before and after photos tell shocking, ironic, and sometimes heartbreaking stories where the mirror stopped telling the truth. So the real question is this: who crossed the line, and what were they truly searching for when they decided to change their face forever? Katie Price. Katie Price is one of those celebrities who never pretended that plastic surgery simply happened to her. While many stars guard their surgeons like classified information, Katie chose radical honesty. She made transparency her brand. No excuses, no denial, just a confident, "Yes, I did it." Early in her career, Katie had a relatively natural look, glamorous in a classic British tabloid way. But in her early 30s, she decided natural was no longer the destination. Reinvention was, and subtlety was not invited. In 1999, she took her first major step by increasing her chest from a 32B to a bold 32DDD and refining her nose. For some celebrities, that would have been a single upgrade. For Katie, it was only the beginning. By 2006, she openly described herself as totally plastic, not with shame, but with pride. At least she was not selling fantasies about yoga and detox teas. Over time, the changes became impossible to ignore. By 2016, fuller lips and a tighter, brighter face signaled another transformation. 2 years later, she appeared at an awards show looking so different that many people struggled to recognize her at all. It was no longer shocking. It was unsettling. By 2019, the situation raised concern. Katie reportedly increased her implants almost yearly, with each one weighing around 2 kilograms. Some plastic surgeons publicly warned about the long-term strain on her body, noting that even confidence has physical limits. That is where the humor fades into something more bittersweet. Katie Price remains fearless and unapologetically herself. Yet watching her journey feels like watching someone chase happiness through a reflection that keeps drifting farther away. She never lied to the public. She just kept changing until the original version quietly slipped out of view. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson did not wake up one day and decide to change his face. It happened slowly, piece by piece, until the world could no longer recognize the boy it once watched grow up. When Michael was young, his appearance was unmistakable, but insecurity crept in early, especially about his nose. According to widely repeated accounts, he was so unsure about surgery that he asked his sister LaToya to go first. When her results turned out well, Michael followed in 1979. That moment quietly opened the door to a transformation that never truly ended. Over the years, Michael reportedly underwent numerous cosmetic procedures. Multiple nose surgeries reshaped his face again and again. He was also believed to have had work done on his eyelids, cheeks, chin, and skin. Medical insiders later suggested that some procedures were done within short intervals, creating a cycle of constant correction. As time passed, the changes became impossible to ignore. His face grew sharper, more fragile, and increasingly artificial. Eventually, even his natural ethnic features seemed to fade, sparking endless speculation and debate. The tragedy of Michael Jackson's story is not the surgery itself, but the outcome. None of it appeared to bring him peace. Each adjustment promised relief, yet led to another. He was not chasing beauty or youth. He was trying to escape a reflection he no longer recognized. Michael Jackson became the most famous face in the world, then slowly transformed it until it no longer felt like home. His music will live forever. His struggle with identity remains a quiet, haunting reminder of what fame can take away. Do you think Michael Jackson's transformation was driven more by personal insecurity or by the crushing pressure of global fame, and at what point do you believe the change went too far? Share your thoughts in the comments. Jocelyn Wildenstein. Jocelyn Wildenstein did not transform herself for fame or attention. Her story is far more uncomfortable than that. Jocelyn's extreme cosmetic journey was driven by love, or more precisely by the fear of losing it. Married to billionaire art dealer Alec Wildenstein, Jocelyn reportedly believed that changing her appearance would help secure her marriage. Alec's fascination with big cats quietly shaped her goal. She did not want to look like a comic book character, but to develop a feline, exotic appearance that she believed her husband admired. What began as an effort to please someone else slowly turned into a lifelong obsession. Over time, Jocelyn underwent an astonishing number of cosmetic procedures: eyelid surgeries, eye lifts, brow lifts, face lifts, lip injections, chin enhancements, fat grafting, and cheek implants stacked one on top of another. Each procedure promised improvement. Instead, they combined into a look that shocked the public and made her instantly recognizable, though not in the way anyone hopes to be. The most painful irony is that the marriage ended anyway. Jocelyn and Alec eventually divorced, and while she received a massive financial settlement, no amount of money could reverse the emotional cost. For decades, Jocelyn denied having any plastic surgery at all, despite overwhelming visual evidence. Many believe this denial was not arrogance but dependency. Admitting the truth would mean confronting how far she had gone. Her story is not humorous but haunting. Jocelyn Wildenstein did not lose herself in one moment. She faded slowly, procedure by procedure, trying to become someone she believed was worth staying for. Hang Myoku. Hang Myoku did not chase fame, beauty standards, or attention online. Her story became known for a much darker reason. It is one of the most painful examples of how cosmetic obsession can spiral when no one steps in soon enough. Hang Myoku began her journey in her late 20s with a simple goal. She wanted flawless skin. What started as routine cosmetic procedures in Japan slowly turned into dependence. Surgeons eventually refused to operate on her anymore, warning that further procedures would be dangerous. Instead of stopping, Hang searched for alternatives. When she returned to South Korea, her appearance had changed so drastically that even her own parents did not recognize her. She briefly sought psychological help, but the addiction remained. Eventually, she found a surgeon who provided silicone injections and later the supplies to inject herself at home. When those ran out, she used cooking oil on her face, believing it would achieve the same effect. The damage was severe. Her face became permanently swollen, scarred, and distorted. Public sympathy followed, and donations helped fund multiple corrective surgeries. Even after more than 10 attempts to reverse the damage, doctors were unable to fully restore her appearance. Today, Hang Myoku lives a quiet life, working in a secondhand clothing store and receiving government assistance. Her story is not shocking. It is heartbreaking. She did not want to become extreme. She simply could not stop. Hang Myoku's face became a warning, not about vanity, but about what happens when the desire for perfection replaces self-preservation. At what point do you think the line between self-improvement and self-destruction was crossed in Hangmyoku's story, and who, if anyone, should have stopped it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Simon Cowell. Simon Cowell built his career judging others, but eventually the spotlight turned back on him. Known for his sharp tongue and unfiltered honesty on shows like The X Factor and Got Talent, Simon was never someone audiences expected to see chasing youth. Yet time has a way of humbling everyone, even the judges. As the years passed, Simon's appearance began to change, and not quietly. By 2023, he openly admitted that he had gone too far trying to look younger. He described some of his cosmetic choices as extreme, saying they altered his face so much that he barely recognized himself. The internet noticed immediately. Comparisons were ruthless, with some saying he looked more like a movie character than a real person. The moment that truly hit him, however, came at home. Simon revealed that his young son Eric was upset by how different his father looked. That reaction mattered more than headlines or jokes ever could. It forced Simon to confront a hard truth. Wanting to look younger had crossed into something that felt wrong even to the people who loved him most. After that wake-up call, Simon changed course. He stepped back from aggressive cosmetic treatments and focused instead on simpler routines. Facials replaced drastic procedures. Health became more important than illusion. He cleaned up his diet, drank more water, and shifted his mindset from looking younger to feeling better. Simon Cowell's story is not about vanity alone. It is about realizing a little too late that fighting age can cost you your own reflection. He did not lose himself completely, but he came close enough to know when to stop. Victoria Wilde. Victoria Wilde never aimed to look natural. That idea was never part of the plan. From the beginning, her goal was clear and extreme. She wanted to resemble a living inflatable doll, exaggerated, artificial, and impossible to ignore. Originally from Latvia, Victoria pursued this image through repeated cosmetic procedures. She underwent several breast augmentations, eventually reaching an unusually large size, along with permanent lip implants and frequent Botox injections. Each procedure pushed her further from realism and closer to the fantasy she believed would make her stand out. What makes her story especially unsettling is not just the transformation itself, but who encouraged it. Victoria openly admitted that her surgeries were funded by a sugar daddy and supported by her modeling agency. In that environment, extreme changes were not questioned. They were rewarded. The more artificial the look became, the more attention and opportunity followed. Victoria later explained that her journey began with deep insecurity and feelings of inferiority. Surgery felt like a solution. Attention became validation. Over time, she stopped caring how people described her. Being labeled a human inflatable doll no longer offended her. It confirmed that her transformation had succeeded. Yet beneath the confidence lies an uncomfortable truth. When your worth is built entirely on shock value, there is little space left for identity beyond the image. Victoria Wilde achieved exactly what she set out to become. What remains unclear is whether she gained control over her appearance or quietly surrendered everything else along the way. These stories don't end here. Hit subscribe and stay with us as we explore more shocking before and after celebrity transformations. Anastasia Pokraschuk. Anastasia Pokraschuk did not become famous by fitting into beauty standards. She became known by pushing far beyond them. Originally from Kiev, Anastasia's transformation began like many others with Botox veneers, jaw reshaping, chin contouring, and liposuction. At first glance, it seemed like another influencer experimenting with cosmetic enhancements. Then came the detail that changed everything. Anastasia does her own facial fillers. She learned through online tutorials and openly admits she injects herself at home. According to her, strict hygiene rules are followed and every procedure is treated with medical seriousness. She trusts her own hands completely, perhaps more than any licensed professional. Over time, her appearance became intentionally extreme. Her cheekbones grew larger, sharper, and unmistakably exaggerated. This was not an accident or a mistake. Anastasia has openly stated that her goal is to have the biggest cheekbones in the world. Standing out matters more to her than blending in. Medical professionals have voiced concern, warning about circulation damage, long-term complications, and irreversible risks. Anastasia acknowledges the warnings but continues anyway. For her, control is everything. Allowing someone else to shape her face would mean surrendering the one thing she values most. Her story is both fascinating and unsettling. Anastasia is not chasing traditional beauty. She is chasing ownership over her image. Yet beneath the confidence lies a quiet question. If the filler stopped tomorrow, would the attention disappear too? If the mirror could talk, what do you think it would have told her before things went too far? Drop your answer in the comments. Nanette Hammond. Nanette Hammond spent most of her adult life chasing one image and one image only: Barbie. Not as a playful fantasy, but as a long-term life project that consumed time, money, and identity. A former model from the UK, Nanette reportedly spent more than $500,000 on cosmetic procedures. Breast augmentations, facelifts, fillers, Botox, and body sculpting became routine. Each surgery promised youth perfection and control over aging, and for a while it worked. Her appearance grew more exaggerated, more doll-like, and more attention followed. What makes her story unsettling is not just how much she changed, but how long she planned to continue. Nanette openly stated that she intended to keep undergoing cosmetic surgery until the age of 70. That meant a lifetime defined not by experiences or milestones, but by maintenance. Staying frozen in time became the goal. Her transformation eventually turned into entertainment. She appeared on reality television, allowing cameras to document her surgeries and recovery. What once felt personal became public spectacle. Pain, risk, and alteration were no longer private decisions. They were content. Beneath the polished exterior, there is an uncomfortable question. When someone dedicates decades to fighting age, what happens when time finally wins? Nanette Hammond did not just want to look younger. She wanted to escape the idea of aging altogether. Her story is not about vanity alone. It is about fear. Fear of time, fear of irrelevance, and fear of being seen as ordinary once the illusion fades. Pixie Fox. Pixie Fox did not want to look like a real person. She wanted to look like a fantasy. Specifically, a mix of animated perfection and cartoon exaggeration, something halfway between Tinker Bell and Jessica Rabbit. Reality for Pixie was never the goal. Her transformation was fast, deliberate, and unapologetically extreme. Pixie reportedly spent thousands of dollars on cosmetic procedures, starting with more familiar ones like a nose job, eyelid surgery, brow lifts, and fillers for her lips and cheeks. But she did not stop where most people would. Not even close. Over time, she underwent multiple breast augmentations, a Brazilian butt lift, permanent makeup, and then crossed the line that made even seasoned surgeons hesitate. Pixie had several ribs removed to achieve an impossibly small waist. A literal reshaping of her skeleton, all in the name of aesthetics. Finding a doctor willing to perform the procedure was difficult, but persistence eventually won. Pixie openly encourages others to consider plastic surgery as a way to chase their dreams. That message, however, is where discomfort sets in. What sounds empowering on the surface becomes dangerous when filtered through young and impressionable minds. Her body became a project, then a statement, and finally a warning. There is something haunting about Pixie Fox's story. She achieved the look she wanted, but at a cost that cannot be undone. The fantasy is permanent. The consequences are too. And while she smiles confidently for the camera, one cannot help but wonder what happens when the cartoon dream fades and the body is left to carry the reality alone. Blondie Bennett. Blondie Bennett did not stop at changing her body. For her, that was only the beginning. Blondie's obsession with Barbie went far beyond appearance. She wanted to become the doll in every possible way, even if that meant letting go of parts of herself most people would fight to keep. Over the years, Blondie underwent multiple cosmetic procedures to mimic the classic Barbie look. Breast augmentations, facial fillers, and styling choices were carefully aligned with the plastic icon she admired. She even recreated outfits and poses to match real Barbie dolls, blurring the line between admiration and imitation. But the most disturbing part of her journey had nothing to do with surgery. Blondie openly admitted to undergoing hypnotherapy with the goal of reducing her cognitive abilities. She wanted to be more forgetful, less analytical, and in her words, more like a doll. Intelligence, she believed, got in the way of the fantasy. The fewer thoughts, the better the illusion. She spoke casually about these sessions, even joking about becoming dumber as if it were a harmless lifestyle choice. Yet beneath the laughter was something deeply unsettling. After reshaping her body to look artificial, she now wanted her mind to follow. Blondie Bennett's story forces an uncomfortable question. When the desire to escape reality becomes stronger than the desire to exist within it, where does the transformation end? She did not just want to look like Barbie, she wanted to stop being human enough to feel the weight of being one. Her journey is not playful or ironic. It is a reminder that sometimes the most extreme transformations are not visible on the outside at all. Jessica Alves. Jessica Alves has lived not one transformation but two. Her story is not just about plastic surgery, it is about identity reinvention and the physical limits of the human body. Originally known to the public for her attempt to become a real-life Ken doll, Jessica began altering her appearance at just 17 years old. At the time, the goal was clear and extreme. She wanted to be recognized as the human version of plastic perfection. That vision came with a long list of procedures, including multiple nose surgeries, chest implants, and even the removal of 4 ribs to create an unnaturally narrow waist. She also had abdominal implants placed to give the illusion of a permanent six-pack. The price was staggering both financially and physically. Years later, Jessica came out as transgender and began presenting as female. With that decision came yet another wave of surgeries, reversing some changes while introducing new ones. More procedures, more recovery, more strain on a body that had already been pushed far beyond normal limits. By her own account, the total cost of her transformations reached hundreds of thousands. What makes Jessica's story unsettling is not her transition. It is the sheer volume of surgical intervention her body has endured in pursuit of two different ideals. First Ken, then hyperfemininity. Each phase promised happiness. Each demanded more. Jessica Alves is still searching for peace in the mirror. Her journey raises a difficult question. How many times can a body be reshaped before it finally says no, no matter how strong the will behind it remains? Don't just watch and scroll away. Subscribe and be part of the conversation behind these unforgettable celebrity stories. Nikki Exotica. Nikki Exotica did not stumble into transformation. She committed to it for decades. Born as Nicole Sanders, Nikki's journey toward becoming a real-life Barbie was not impulsive but relentless. Surgery was not a phase. It became a lifestyle. From a young age, Nikki reportedly felt deeply uncomfortable with her male identity. Barbie dolls became more than toys. They became symbols of safety, beauty, and certainty. As she grew older, that fixation hardened into a goal. She would not just admire the doll, she would become it. Over nearly 20 years, Nikki underwent an extraordinary number of cosmetic procedures. Breast augmentations, facial reconstruction fillers, implants, and gender-affirming surgeries stacked one after another. By her own account, she spent hundreds of thousands of dollars willingly risking her health to perfect an image that existed only in plastic form. Unlike others who chase attention, Nikki framed her transformation as destiny. Pain was treated as proof of commitment. Each procedure brought her closer to the version of herself she believed was always meant to exist. Yet the cost was undeniable. Repeated surgeries pushed her body to its limits, leaving lasting physical strain. What makes Nikki's story uncomfortable is not her transition, but the extremity of the ideal she chased. Barbie is flawless because she is not real. Turning that fantasy into flesh requires sacrifice without end. Nikki Exotica achieved her dream. The question that lingers is whether becoming the image she worshipped finally brought peace, or simply locked her into a form she can never escape. Sahar Tabar. Sahar Tabar became famous not for beauty talent or fashion, but for shock. Born Fatime Kishvand, Sahar found a way to stand out in the most extreme way possible. While others dyed their hair or experimented with makeup, she chose transformation that felt closer to performance art than self-expression. Around 2017, images of Sahar began circulating online. In the photos, she appeared disturbingly altered with hollowed cheeks, exaggerated lips, and a face many compared to a zombie-like version of Angelina Jolie. The comparison went viral, though Sahar later suggested heavy makeup and editing played a role. Exactly how many cosmetic procedures she underwent remains unclear, but most agree it was far from minimal. What made her story stranger was not just her appearance, but what followed. Sahar's online fame attracted the attention of authorities in Iran, where she was accused of vague offenses such as blasphemy and corruption. She was arrested and initially faced the possibility of a long prison sentence before later being released on bail. Suddenly, what began as a quest for attention turned into a very real confrontation with consequences. Sahar Tabar's story feels like a collision between internet culture and real-world limits. Online extremes are rewarded with likes and shares. Offline, those same extremes can bring isolation, danger, and regret. She wanted to look different, unforgettable, and she succeeded. But her face became a symbol of something darker, a reminder that viral fame can disappear overnight while its consequences often remain. Mickey Rourke. Mickey Rourke stands apart from many names on this list for one simple reason. His surgeries were not about vanity at first, they were about survival. Long before his face became a topic of headlines, Mickey Rourke was fighting a different battle, one that left real damage behind. In the 1990s, at the height of his acting fame, Rourke walked away from Hollywood and stepped into professional boxing. What followed was a brutal toll on his face. He suffered multiple broken noses, a crushed cheekbone, injuries to his tongue, and neurological issues including memory loss. The damage was severe enough that reconstructive surgery became necessary, not optional. To repair the injuries, Rourke underwent several facial surgeries, including 5 nose operations and a procedure to rebuild his damaged cheekbone. Unfortunately, the early results left him dissatisfied. Instead of restoring his old appearance, the surgeries altered it in unexpected ways. In an effort to fix those results, he agreed to more procedures and then more again. That cycle changed everything. The original goal of reconstruction slowly blurred into correction, and correction drifted into excess. By the time Rourke returned to acting, his face was almost unrecognizable compared to his earlier roles. He later admitted that choosing the wrong surgeon was a mistake that permanently altered his appearance. Mickey Rourke's story is not about chasing youth. It is about how injury, regret, and repeated intervention can trap someone in an endless attempt to undo the past. He did not set out to transform his face. He tried to save it, and in the process, he lost the version of himself audiences once knew forever. Jordan James Park. Jordan James Park believed that if he could look like Kim Kardashian, life would finally make sense. Fame, confidence, validation, all of it seemed just one procedure away. What Jordan did not fully consider was the cost of turning admiration into imitation. Inspired by the Kardashian empire and its carefully curated image, Jordan began a rapid cycle of cosmetic surgery. Lip fillers came first, then more fillers, and then even more. His lips grew larger with each session, eventually becoming the feature everyone noticed for the wrong reasons. Multiple nose surgeries followed, each one intended to refine the previous result, but instead creating new problems. One of the most serious consequences was functional, not cosmetic. After repeated rhinoplasty procedures, Jordan reportedly struggled with breathing issues. What began as an effort to look glamorous turned into a medical concern. The face he wanted to perfect was now working against him. Unlike the Kardashians themselves, who often deny or downplay their cosmetic work, Jordan was open about his choices. He wanted to look like his idol and saw surgery as the fastest route. But imitation is unforgiving. Without the filter's lighting and billion-dollar brand behind it, the look did not translate the way he imagined. Jordan James Park's story is a cautionary one. It is not about bad surgery alone. It is about chasing a manufactured ideal without the safety net that created it. He did not become Kim Kardashian. He became a reminder that some images are designed to be admired, not worn. Chloe Lattanzi. Chloe Lattanzi grew up with a famous last name and a spotlight she never asked for. As the daughter of Olivia Newton-John, Chloe spent her formative years surrounded by celebrity culture expectations and constant comparison. For her beauty was never just personal. It felt mandatory. From a young age, Chloe struggled with body dysmorphia, eating disorders, and addiction. Being raised around famous faces only intensified the pressure. As a teenager, she began battling anorexia, convinced that her body was something that needed fixing. Surgery eventually entered the picture not as vanity, but as an attempt to gain control over how she felt inside. Chloe underwent cosmetic procedures hoping they would quiet the self-criticism in her head. Instead, they added confusion. She later admitted that she did not fully understand why she was making those choices at the time. The surgeries did not bring confidence. They only masked deeper pain that had never been addressed. Unlike many others on this list, Chloe eventually stepped back. She reversed some procedures and began speaking openly about the emotional damage they caused. She acknowledged that surgery had been a distraction from healing, not the solution itself. What makes Chloe Lattanzi's story different is the honesty that came after. She does not glamorize her transformation, she warns against it. Her experience serves as a reminder that when surgery is used to silence emotional wounds, it often makes them louder. Chloe did not lose herself to plastic surgery forever, but she came close enough to understand how easily that line can be crossed when self-worth is built under constant scrutiny, under constant scrutiny, under constant scrutiny, under constant scrutiny. Mickey Rourke! Mickey Rourke stands apart from many names on this list for one simple reason. His surgeries were not about vanity at first, they were about survival. Long before his face became a topic of headlines, Mickey Rourke was fighting a different battle, one that left real damage behind. In the 1990s, at the height of his acting fame, Rourke walked away from Hollywood and stepped into professional boxing. What followed was a brutal toll on his face. He suffered multiple broken noses, a crushed cheekbone injuries to his tongue, and neurological issues including memory loss. The damage was severe enough that reconstructive surgery became necessary, not optional. To repair the injuries, Rourke underwent several facial surgeries including 5 nose operations and a procedure to rebuild his damaged cheekbone. Unfortunately, the early results left him dissatisfied. Instead of restoring his old appearance, the surgeries altered it in unexpected ways. In an effort to fix those results, he agreed to more procedures and then more again. That cycle changed everything. The original goal of reconstruction slowly blurred into correction, and correction drifted into excess. By the time Rourke returned to acting, his face was almost unrecognizable compared to his earlier roles. He later admitted that choosing the wrong surgeon was a mistake that permanently altered his appearance. Mickey Rourke's story is not about chasing youth. It is about how injury, regret, and repeated intervention can trap someone in an endless attempt to undo the past. He did not set out to transform his face. He tried to save it, and in the process, he lost the version of himself audiences once knew forever. What if the faces you worshipped weren't born but built? Behind the glamour of Golden Age, Hollywood hid scalpels, secret clinics, and transformation studios buried deeper than any scandal. From subtle tweaks to complete reconstructions, these 16 secret surgeries didn't just enhance stars, they created them. What you're about to discover is shocking, unsettling, and will change how you see classic Hollywood forever. Rita Hayworth. Hollywood introduced her as the ultimate American sex symbol. Flame-haired, luminous, impossibly glamorous Rita Hayworth moved across the screen like a promise whispered directly to the audience. In films like Gilda, she wasn't just desired, she was worshipped. The studios sold her as effortless beauty, a fantasy that seemed to exist outside of time. But buried beneath the red hair and satin gowns was a truth so brutal it was never meant to be spoken aloud. She was not born Rita Hayworth. She was Margarita Carmen Cancino, visibly Hispanic, with dark hair, olive skin, and a naturally low hairline that marked her heritage. In mid-1930s Hollywood, that heritage was considered a liability. When Columbia Pictures chief Harry Cohn decided to remake her, the transformation began with one of the most painful procedures of the Golden Age, electrolysis to raise her hairline. Week after week, for nearly 18 months, technicians applied electric currents to her forehead and temples, killing hair follicles one by one without effective anesthesia. The pain, by later accounts, felt like her skin was being burned away inch by inch. This was not beautification, it was erasure. By the time the process ended, her hairline had been raised more than an inch, reshaping her face into something Hollywood deemed acceptable. Her naturally black hair was dyed auburn, her name was changed, and the traces of her ethnic identity were carefully stripped away. Margarita disappeared, replaced by Rita Hayworth, a woman constructed to fit the racial and commercial demands of the era. The world applauded the result, never seeing the agony behind it, never knowing that one of Hollywood's most celebrated beauties was built on sustained physical torment and the quiet loss of self. Marilyn Monroe. They sold her to the world as a miracle of nature. Platinum hair glowing under studio lights, a smile that seemed to breathe a face so soft and luminous it felt inevitable, as if destiny itself had sculpted it. On screen, Marilyn Monroe didn't simply perform, she dominated the frame, embodying a fantasy so effortless that audiences believed she had been born complete. But behind that illusion of natural perfection, Hollywood insiders whispered a different origin story, one that began not with fame but with calculation. Before the legend, there was Norma Jean Baker, pretty photogenic but not yet unforgettable. Around 1950, as she pushed towards serious acting, the transformation quietly began. According to long-circulated studio accounts, talent agent Johnny Hyde personally financed surgical refinements he believed were necessary to manufacture a true star. A discreet chin implant softened her jaw into the now iconic heart-shaped face, while a subtle rhinoplasty refined the tip of her nose for relentless close-ups. These were not drastic alterations meant to shock, but precise adjustments designed to vanish into the illusion, creating a face the camera would worship without ever questioning. When those changes were combined with platinum-dye dramatic makeup and the carefully cultivated persona, Hollywood didn't just enhance a woman, it created an entirely new being. Marilyn Monroe became a cultural blueprint, her surgically perfected features shaping global beauty standards for generations to come. Yet beneath the polish lived a deeper cost, the quiet fracture between who she had been and who she was required to become. Norma Jean did not simply disappear, she was buried beneath an image so powerful that even its creator struggled to recognize herself within it. If you believe Marilyn Monroe's beauty was shaped by surgery, leave a 1 in the comments. I'm curious how many of you think Hollywood helped create Marilyn. Gary Cooper. He was the embodiment of quiet strength. Tall, restrained, effortlessly masculine. Gary Cooper carried himself with a dignity that made him seem carved from American ideals themselves. On screen, he didn't need theatrics or excess, his presence alone commanded attention. To audiences, his look appeared natural, almost inevitable, as if Hollywood had simply discovered him fully formed. But behind that calm exterior, the studio system saw something else entirely, a flaw too small for the public to name, yet too dangerous for executives to ignore. Early screen tests in the late 1920s revealed what Paramount executives quietly fixated on: slightly protruding ears noticeable in profile shots and close-ups. In an industry obsessed with symmetry and control, even this minor imperfection was treated as a threat. As Cooper transitioned from bit roles to leading man potential, the decision was made with chilling efficiency. He underwent ear-pinning surgery, a relatively simple procedure by modern standards, but one that permanently altered his appearance. The operation pulled his ears closer to his head, refining his silhouette and creating the flawless profile that would soon dominate movie screens. The surgery worked exactly as intended. After recovery, Cooper returned to the camera, transformed not dramatically, but decisively. The distraction was gone, replaced by a clean, heroic outline that photographed beautifully and reinforced his image as the stoic, idealized male lead. Audiences never noticed the change, and that was the point. His case revealed one of Hollywood's coldest truths: perfection was not discovered, it was engineered. Even a man as naturally gifted as Gary Cooper was not allowed to remain untouched, because in the golden age studio system, no imperfection, no matter how small, was ever truly acceptable. John Wayne. In Hollywood, aging was forgiven only if it looked heroic. For John Wayne, the man cast as the embodiment of American strength, time itself became a silent adversary, one that could not be allowed to leave visible marks on the screen. His face was more than a face. It was a symbol, a national myth built on firmness, resolve, and an unshakable presence. Any softening of that image was not just personal, it was a threat to the illusion millions believed in. By the early 1950s, as Wayne approached his late 40s, the camera began to notice what the public was never meant to see. The jawline that once defined authority had begun to blur the eyes carried a heaviness that translated as fatigue under studio lights. The response was swift and silent. Wayne underwent facelift surgery targeting the neck and lower face, restoring the hard lines essential to his on-screen identity. Later, eyelid surgery subtly lifted the weight from his gaze, ensuring he still looked battle-ready rather than battle-worn. These procedures were never acknowledged, carefully scheduled between films, and concealed behind supposedly rugged retreats, fishing trips, hunting excursions, time off the grid. The truth was never meant to surface. Unlike his female counterparts, Wayne could not afford even a whisper of vanity. His surgeries were framed not as a desire to look younger, but as a necessity to remain believable as the indestructible figure Hollywood demanded. In preserving John Wayne's image through hidden intervention, the studio system exposed its most rigid rule. Legends were allowed to age only in ways that supported the story, never in ways that revealed the man beneath it. Elizabeth Taylor. Hollywood insisted she was born enchanted, violet eyes that seemed unreal, lashes so thick they looked painted on a face that cameras adored from the moment she appeared as a child. Elizabeth Taylor was presented as proof that true beauty needed no correction, no interference, no studio tricks. The myth was powerful and carefully protected, because even perfection in the Golden Age was never trusted to remain untouched. Behind closed MGM doors, the studio saw details the audience was never meant to scrutinize. As Taylor grew from child star into a future leading lady, executives quietly addressed what they considered minor imperfections in her smile. Beginning in the mid-1940s, when she was barely a teenager, dental reconstruction and early orthodontic techniques were introduced gradually, almost invisibly. Her teeth, slightly uneven in early appearances, were reshaped and aligned over several years using subtle bonding and corrective methods. There was no sudden transformation, no dramatic before and after, only a slow evolution that allowed her smile to mature seamlessly alongside her fame. That patience was deliberate. MGM understood that Elizabeth Taylor's power lay in the illusion of effortlessness. Unlike stars who were radically remade, her beauty was refined rather than rebuilt, preserved rather than overwritten. By the time she reached adulthood, her smile matched the rest of her legendary features, flawless, luminous, unquestioned. The studio had succeeded in its quietest triumph, altering a face without ever breaking the spell that it had always been perfect exactly as it was meant to be. If you believe Elizabeth Taylor's beauty was quietly perfected by Hollywood, leave a 5 in the comments and let me know you're watching. Burt Lancaster. Before the fame, before the awards, before the image of raw athleticism burned into Hollywood history, Burt Lancaster was already physically extraordinary. A former circus acrobat and soldier, his body projected strength, motion, and danger in a way few actors could match. On screen tests, producers saw a man who moved like a force of nature. But when the camera moved closer, when it lingered on his face, Hollywood noticed something it could not ignore. His smile did not match the myth they wanted to sell. Years of physical labor, military service, and hard living had left Lancaster with damaged, uneven, and missing teeth, a silent contradiction to the heroic image forming around him. As he prepared for his film debut in The Killers in 1946, the studio intervened decisively. Extensive dental reconstruction followed, bridges, partial dentures, and early veneer techniques carefully engineered to preserve what remained while creating a uniform, brilliant smile suited for black and white film. This was not cosmetic vanity, it was structural necessity designed to align his face with the commanding physical presence he already possessed. The transformation was immediate and profound. With his new smile, Lancaster's entire screen energy shifted. He smiled more freely, held close-ups, longer projected confidence that had previously been restrained. That dazzling grin became a signature and essential weapon in his rise to stardom and a defining feature of his performances in films like From Here to Eternity. Hollywood had not changed who Burt Lancaster was. It had unlocked the version it believed audiences were ready to worship, proving once again that in the Golden Age, even raw power required precision engineering. Judy Garland. She was supposed to be America's sweetheart. A voice that sounded like pure longing, eyes that carried more emotion than her years should have allowed. On screen, Judy Garland radiated innocence and vulnerability, a fragile magic that made audiences feel protective. But behind the curtains at MGM, that innocence was treated as a problem to be managed, corrected, and reshaped long before she was old enough to understand what was being done to her. As early as age 14, studio executives fixated on Garland's teeth, declaring them imperfect for close-ups. Rather than allowing natural growth or proper orthodontic care, MGM dentists imposed a brutal solution: removable dental caps designed to create an instantly flawless smile. These devices were painful, restrictive, and often interfered with her speech and singing. She was required to wear them during filming, enduring constant discomfort while performing demanding roles under intense pressure. Studio records framed the procedure as routine maintenance, but to the young actress, it was another reminder that her body no longer belonged to her. The dental alterations were only one part of a much larger system of control: forced dieting, relentless criticism of her appearance, and chemical stimulants to keep her working long hours. Her smile, polished for the camera, concealed a growing sense of inadequacy and exhaustion that followed her into adulthood. Judy Garland's case stands as one of the darkest examples of Hollywood's golden age machine, where even a child's body could be modified in service of an image, and where the price of enchantment was paid long before the applause ever began. Clark Gable. He was crowned the King of Hollywood, a title built on swagger, confidence, and a smile powerful enough to carry an entire studio. Clark Gable's grin became legend, easy, masculine, irresistibly assured. On screen, it suggested strength without effort, charm without calculation. Audiences never doubted it was real. Hollywood made sure they never had a reason to. By the early 1930s, the truth behind that famous smile had become a studio emergency. Severe periodontal disease worsened by heavy smoking and years of neglect had left Gable with rotting, decaying teeth that threatened his future as a romantic leading man. When he signed with MGM, the decision was ruthless and immediate. Rather than attempt to save what remained, studio dentists ordered complete tooth extraction, replacing his natural teeth with full dentures crafted specifically for the camera. The process was long, painful, and carried out in total secrecy, with temporary dentures used during filming to maintain continuity. The final result was engineered perfection. His dentures were designed slightly larger and stronger than natural teeth, enhancing his masculine presence and creating the commanding smile audiences came to adore in films like Gone with the Wind. The cost, however, was constant discomfort and the risk of exposure. Gable guarded the secret fiercely, even from close friends, knowing that the illusion of effortless virility was essential to his power as a star. In rebuilding Clark Gable's smile from the ground up, Hollywood proved just how far it was willing to go to protect a myth, remaking a man's face entirely as long as the crown never slipped. If there's anything you're not satisfied with or any feedback you'd like to share, please leave a comment below. We truly listen and deeply appreciate every thought you share with us. Joan Crawford. She was not born elegant, she was forged into it. Joan Crawford's face cut through the screen with sharp intensity, her cheekbones like weapons, her expression unyielding. In an era that rewarded softness, Crawford became unforgettable by looking severe, sculpted, almost intimidating. That striking appearance was no accident. It was the result of discipline, obsession, and a willingness to endure pain that few of her contemporaries could match. As she transitioned in the late 1920s from a jazz-age dancer to a serious dramatic actress, MGM began reshaping her image with ruthless precision. The most extreme step was the removal of healthy back molars, a drastic dental decision intended to hollow her cheeks and accentuate her bone structure. The extractions were carried out gradually over nearly 2 years, planned with surgical intent to transform her face into something more angular and commanding. Performed without modern anesthesia, the procedures caused prolonged pain and lingering discomfort. But Crawford accepted them as part of the bargain she had made with fame. The result was one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood history. Those hollowed cheeks combined with her sharply arched brows and dramatic makeup created a look that photographed with astonishing power. Joan Crawford believed suffering was not a tragedy, but an investment proof of commitment in an industry that devoured women without mercy. Her beauty was not soft, not natural, and never accidental. It was built tooth by tooth through endurance until pain itself became part of her legend. Cary Grant. In Hollywood, some men were allowed to grow old. Cary Grant was not one of them. His image had been carefully elevated into something almost unreal, smooth, controlled, eternally composed. He wasn't just a leading man, he was a standard, a vision of masculine perfection that studios relied on to remain unchanged. Any visible surrender to time would have fractured the fantasy, and Hollywood does not forgive fractures. As the early 1950s arrived and Grant edged toward 50, the first signs of aging appeared where the camera was most unforgiving: the jawline and the neck. What followed was handled in absolute silence. Grant underwent a subtle facelift, meticulously limited in scope, designed to erase fatigue without leaving fingerprints of intervention. The surgery was arranged privately, far from studio oversight, with Grant recovering under an assumed name in a secluded European clinic. His absence was explained away as travel, nothing more than a gentleman taking time abroad. When he returned, the effect was unsettling in its perfection. There was no visible change, only the absence of decline. Grant's face continued to project effortless confidence, as if time itself had chosen to step aside. The truth was buried because it had to be. For a man whose appeal depended on appearing untouched, even the suggestion of cosmetic effort could have damaged the myth. Cary Grant did not defeat aging. Hollywood simply refused to let the audience see the battle. Greta Garbo. She arrived in Hollywood wrapped in mystery before mystery was even part of her brand. Greta Garbo did not smile easily, did not explain herself, did not bend toward the audience. On screen, her presence felt distant, sculptural, almost unreal, an image so severe and haunting it seemed untouched by human flaws. MGM promoted her as a natural enigma, a woman whose beauty existed beyond explanation. But behind that carefully protected myth, the studio had intervened far more than it ever admitted. When Garbo first signed with MGM in the mid-1920s, executives saw potential but not perfection. Early screen tests revealed a face they considered too soft, too round to command the dramatic power the camera demanded. What followed was a controlled and deliberate transformation. Facial contouring procedures, primitive by modern standards, were used to sharpen her cheekbones and jawline, while extensive dental work refined her smile. At the same time, the studio enforced strict weight control, aided, according to long-circulated industry accounts, by early surgical intervention to limit stomach capacity, ensuring the extreme slenderness that defined her angular silhouette on screen. The result was not simply a more beautiful woman, but an entirely new visual language. Garbo's face became sharp, elongated, and unforgettable, capable of conveying emotion through stillness alone. The softness of her early years vanished, replaced by an image that felt carved rather than born. In reshaping Greta Garbo, Hollywood didn't just enhance an actress, it engineered a legend, proving that even mystery itself could be manufactured as long as the process remained hidden behind studio walls. Dean Martin. Before the tuxedos, before the martinis, before the effortless cool that defined a generation, there was a man named Dino Crocetti. He was talented, charismatic, and unmistakably Italian, carrying his heritage plainly in his features, especially in a nose Hollywood executives quietly labeled as a problem. In an industry obsessed with selling a very specific version of American masculinity, authenticity was a liability and refinement was non-negotiable. In 1948, as his partnership with Jerry Lewis reached its commercial peak, Paramount executives intervened. Studio records and later recollections describe a rhinoplasty designed to narrow and refine Martin's nose, softening what the studio considered too ethnic for the romantic leading man roles they envisioned. The surgery was scheduled during a carefully planned break in his performance schedule, allowing recovery to happen out of sight. Martin was reportedly uneasy, aware that altering his face felt like distancing himself from his roots. To those close to him, he expressed concern that Hollywood wasn't just reshaping his image, it was rewriting his identity. When he returned, the change was subtle but decisive. His profile now matched the polished persona the studio wanted to sell: relaxed, sophisticated, universally appealing. The transformation helped complete the evolution from Dino Crocetti to Dean Martin, the smooth, unbothered entertainer who seemed born to glide through fame without effort. The audience never questioned it, and that was the point. In perfecting Dean Martin's face, Hollywood once again proved its quiet rule: success often required not just talent, but the willingness to let the past disappear without a trace. Sophia Loren. She was introduced to the world as something elemental. Dark, luminous, undeniably powerful, Sophia Loren's beauty felt less like construction and more like fate. The camera didn't just admire her, it surrendered to her. Unlike so many of her contemporaries, she appeared untouched by Hollywood's obsession with correction, as if no hand had dared interfere with what nature had already perfected. That belief, too, was carefully maintained. Early in her career, before international fame reshaped her life, Loren's beauty was assessed with the same cold precision applied to every rising star. While her features were striking in person, industry insiders believed they did not yet translate with maximum impact on film. In the early 1950s in Rome, she underwent subtle cosmetic refinements designed not to alter but to amplify. A delicate procedure known as lateral canthopexy adjusted the outer corners of her eyes, enhancing their almond shape and making them read more dramatically on camera. Minimal facial contouring further emphasized her cheekbones, deepening the sculptural quality that would soon become her signature. The brilliance of these changes lay in their invisibility. There was no sudden transformation, no loss of identity, only a version of Sophia Loren that photographed with heightened intensity. She later viewed these refinements not as betrayal, but as practical investments in her craft. Small, calculated adjustments to ensure her natural beauty could dominate the screen. In her case, Hollywood didn't erase or rebuild. It whispered, refined, and stepped back, leaving behind a legend so seamless that few ever suspected a guiding hand had been there at all. Humphrey Bogart. He didn't sound like other leading men, and that was supposed to be the problem. Humphrey Bogart's voice flat-clipped, slightly off-cut against the polished cadence Hollywood preferred. In his early years, that mild lisp threatened to disqualify him from romantic leads, casting him instead as secondary toughs and background heavies. To the studio system, it wasn't character. It was a flaw that needed fixing before it reached the audience. Between 1935 and 1937, as Warner Brothers quietly prepared Bogart for stardom, he underwent extensive dental reconstruction designed to correct the structural cause of his speech impediment. This was not cosmetic work alone. Partial dentures and reshaped teeth altered the way his tongue moved, changing the mechanics of his speech itself. Studio records later revealed the intervention was approved at the highest level, with executives framing it as a final test to fix the voice or accept a ceiling on his career. What emerged after the procedures was not a perfect, polished delivery, but something far more valuable. The lisp was reduced, not erased, leaving behind a distinctive, slightly slurred cadence that sounded world-weary, ironic, and emotionally armored. That voice became inseparable from his screen persona, defining classics like Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon. Hollywood hadn't eliminated Bogart's flaw, it had engineered it into an asset, quietly rebuilding the man behind the myth until even imperfection sounded unforgettable. Ava Gardner. Hollywood liked to pretend Ava Gardner was discovered, not made. A raw, untamed beauty with a face that seemed too powerful to be controlled, too natural to be engineered. On screen, she radiated danger and desire in equal measure, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged to no one. But behind MGM's carefully crafted mythology, Ava Gardner's transformation was neither effortless nor painless. When she signed with MGM in the early 1940s, studio executives admired her face, but not completely. Her natural hairline was considered too low, too heavy for the dramatic close-ups the camera demanded. The solution was brutal and precise hairline electrolysis, the same punishing procedure inflicted on other rising stars of the era. Week after week, for nearly 6 months, individual hair follicles along her forehead were destroyed with electric current, reshaping her face inch by inch. There was no effective anesthesia. The pain was intense enough that Gardner reportedly fainted during some sessions, arriving at makeup appointments with red eyes and forced jokes meant to hide the toll it was taking. Alongside the electrolysis came subtle facial contouring, enhancing her cheekbones and refining the planes of her face to create the exotic sculptural look that would define her career. The result was undeniable. Ava Gardner emerged as one of MGM's most magnetic leading ladies. But the cost lingered beneath the surface. Her beauty, celebrated as wild and natural, had been carefully carved through endurance. In Ava Gardner's case, Hollywood didn't just polish a diamond, it applied pressure until pain itself became part of the shine. Marlon Brando. Before he shattered acting forever, Marlon Brando was just another striking young man circling the gates of Hollywood, raw talent blazing but not yet untouchable. His presence was electric, his intensity unsettling, his masculinity anything but polished. Studios sensed danger and profit in equal measure. Yet, when early screen tests rolled, executives fixated on a detail Brando himself could not ignore: a nose slightly too wide, too dominant, pulling attention away from his eyes and jaw. In an industry obsessed with control, even rebellion had limits. In 1949, just before A Streetcar Named Desire would catapult him into legend, Brando made a decision that quietly contradicted his later image. He underwent a subtle rhinoplasty carefully designed to narrow and define his nose without stripping it of character. Unlike the dramatic reconstructions forced on other stars, this surgery was precise and restrained. According to accounts from those involved, Brando was adamant about one thing: he did not want to look pretty. He wanted the nose to stop leading the performance, nothing more. The scalpel obeyed. The result was barely noticeable, and that was exactly the point. The refined balance of his face allowed the camera to lock onto his eyes, his mouth the volcanic emotion simmering beneath the surface. Ironically, the man who would later reject Hollywood's superficial values had already participated in its machinery, making a calculated compromise at the moment it mattered most. Marlon Brando didn't sell out his rebellion, but he did shape it quietly, allowing Hollywood to adjust the frame before he tore the whole picture apart. Some people become so obsessed with their idols that admiration turns into obsession and obsession turns into a scalpel. In this list, we explore extreme cases of fans who pushed plastic surgery too far, chasing a face that was never theirs, and paying a price far beyond skin deep. Carolyn Anderson. Pamela Anderson. It didn't begin with surgery. It began with a screen. In the glow of late-night television, a young woman in the UK watched Baywatch and fixated on one image above all others: Pamela Anderson running in slow motion, flawless, untouchable, unreal. For Carolyn Anderson, that image stopped being entertainment and started becoming a destination. The curves, the lips, the body wrapped in a red swimsuit, every detail carved itself into her mind. Admiration quietly mutated into comparison, and comparison into dissatisfaction. Her own reflection no longer felt like her own. The first surgery was supposed to be small, just an adjustment. But once the door was opened, there was no closing it. Carolyn spent over $26,000 chasing Pamela's silhouette, breast augmentations, lip fillers, dental work, and relentless Botox injections that never lasted long enough. Each procedure promised confidence, happiness, completion. Instead, it delivered only temporary relief, followed by a louder hunger to change more. Surgery didn't fix the problem, it fed it. The mirror became both judge and enemy, reminding her daily that she was still not there. Her fixation became so extreme that it pulled her into the public eye. Appearing on the American TV show My Strange Addiction, Carolyn admitted she couldn't stop. Doctors raised concerns, viewers watched in shock, friends whispered worries, but the needle kept going in. Pamela Anderson was no longer a celebrity to her, she was a benchmark, a body Carolyn believed she had to reach in order to feel worthy. Every injection pushed her further away from her original self. Today, Carolyn says she wants to be a sex symbol, a living fantasy. But beneath the silicone and Botox lies a harsher reality: a woman locked in a never-ending transformation, chasing another person's identity. The surgeries reshaped her body, but they also reshaped her sense of self. And the most unsettling question remains unanswered: when you finally look like your idol, who are you left being underneath? Matt and Mike Schlepp. Brad Pitt. They were born identical, but they wanted something more powerful than genetics. Growing up in Arizona, twin brothers Matt and Mike shared the same face, the same dreams, and the same fixation. Brad Pitt wasn't just a movie star to them, he was a shortcut. Fame, success, admiration, all wrapped into one perfect Hollywood face. If they could look like him, they believed life would finally open its doors. Before the surgeries, reality was cruel. Severe acne scarred their skin. Their noses were large and uneven. Casting calls ended quickly. Rejection became routine. Instead of walking away, the twins made a decision that would define their lives. They would surgically erase the past. Thousands of dollars went into cosmetic procedures, skin treatments, nose jobs, facial corrections. Each operation stripped away another piece of who they used to be, replacing it with something artificial, something borrowed. The goal wasn't just Brad Pitt, it was a specific version of him. Strong, heroic, the warrior from Troy. But what they got was something closer to a distorted echo, less Greek god, more war-worn imitation. The resemblance was close enough to attract attention, yet far enough to feel incomplete. Success didn't arrive the way they imagined. Hollywood didn't suddenly call. Fame didn't materialize. The twins were left standing between admiration and disappointment. In the end, Matt and Mike achieved what few ever do. They rewrote their faces. But the transformation exposed an uncomfortable truth. Looking like a star doesn't guarantee a star's life. Beneath the tightened skin and reshaped noses, two brothers remained still searching, still hoping, still wondering whether becoming someone else was ever the answer in the first place. Nadia Suleiman. Angelina Jolie. Her story didn't start with Hollywood. It started with shock. Nadia Suleiman exploded into the public eye as Octomom, the woman who gave birth to 8 babies at once, instantly becoming a global headline. Cameras followed her everywhere, dissecting her choices, her face, her body, and almost immediately the comparisons began. The full lips, the dark hair, the sharp features. The media whispered a dangerous idea: Nadia looked like Angelina Jolie. What should have been coincidence slowly hardened into an identity forced upon her. Nadia insisted she never tried to copy Angelina. She denied having plastic surgery for that reason, claiming her appearance was natural. But those close to her told a different story. Friends alleged she had undergone a nose job and received collagen injections. Whether intentional or not, the resemblance became a curse. Every public appearance sparked another wave of judgment. People stopped seeing Nadia as a mother of 14 children. They saw a controversial imitation, a distorted reflection of a Hollywood icon. The pressure was relentless. Raising 14 children under intense media scrutiny pushed Nadia to the edge financially, emotionally, psychologically. Tattoos of her children's names covered her body, permanent reminders of responsibility and sacrifice. Yet the narrative refused to change. Interviews focused less on survival and more on her face. Was she copying Angelina Jolie? Was she chasing fame? The questions never stopped, and neither did the isolation. In the end, Nadia Suleiman's story is not about transformation through surgery, but transformation through exposure. Fame reshaped her life more violently than any scalpel could. Whether she wanted it or not, she became trapped between motherhood and celebrity myth. And while the world argued about how much she resembled Angelina Jolie, Nadia was left fighting a far more brutal reality, trying to survive while the world watched, judged, and refused to look away. Who is your idol? If you had a large amount of money, would you be willing to change your appearance to look like them? Let us know in the comments. Penny Brown, Jessica Rabbit. This obsession was never rooted in reality. Penny Brown didn't fall in love with a movie star or a celebrity she could meet. She fell in love with a drawing, a hypersexualized cartoon designed to be impossible. When Penny first saw Jessica Rabbit, she didn't see satire or fantasy, she saw a goal. Curves that defied anatomy, a waist thinner than logic, a body that no human was ever meant to inhabit. And yet Penny decided she would try anyway. The transformation began aggressively. Already naturally curvy, Penny underwent 2 breast augmentation surgeries, pushing her body far beyond proportion. But surgery alone wasn't enough. To chase Jessica's unreal waistline, Penny committed to a brutal routine, wearing a corset up to 23 hours a day. Breathing became shallow. Organs were forced inward. Over time, her waist shrank by nearly 40 centimeters. Pain was constant, but Penny treated it as proof of progress. Beauty, she believed, demanded sacrifice. Doctors warned her. Critics mocked her. Penny ignored them all. The mirror became her judge, and Jessica Rabbit remained the standard. What shocked people most wasn't just how far Penny went, but how proudly she documented it. Photos flooded social media. Her exaggerated silhouette turned her into a spectacle, and the audience grew. Over 100,000 followers watched as a real woman reshaped herself into a living cartoon, one corset string at a time. Today, Penny Brown is famous for looking unreal. And that is the most unsettling part. A fictional character designed to exaggerate desire has become a real human blueprint. Penny insists she's happy, but her body tells a harsher story, compressed, strained, altered beyond nature. In trying to become Jessica Rabbit, Penny crossed a dangerous line, proving that sometimes the most damaging idol isn't a person at all, but a fantasy that was never meant to live. Jessie Guerin, Elvis Presley. The story begins with a ghost. Elvis Presley was supposed to have a twin brother, a boy who died at birth and never took a breath. Decades later, another man would resurrect that lost name and turn it into a destiny. Jessie Guerin didn't just admire Elvis, he claimed the identity meant for someone who never lived. From the very start, his obsession carried the weight of something unfinished, something borrowed from death itself. Jessie's dream wasn't subtle. He wanted the hair, the jawline, the lips, the presence. When MTV launched I Want a Famous Face, a show that offered free plastic surgery to people desperate to look like celebrities, Jessie saw his opening. Surgeons reshaped his face inch by inch, chasing the illusion of the king of rock and roll. Each procedure stripped away more of Jessie's original self, replacing it with a carefully engineered tribute to a man frozen in history. But unlike many others on this list, Jessie's transformation worked at least on the surface. His resemblance became convincing enough to open doors. Las Vegas stages welcomed him, crowds applauded, cameras flashed. For moments at a time, Jessie wasn't a fan anymore. He was Elvis reborn, performing inside a fantasy that millions had worshipped for generations. The surgeries didn't just change his face, they gave him access to a world that rewards imitation. Yet behind the rhinestones and stage lights, a question lingered. When the music stops and the costume comes off, who remains Jessie? Guerin built a life by stepping into another man's shadow, one cast so large it erased the person beneath it. His transformation is one of the few labeled a success, but even success has a price. Because living as a legend means never fully living as yourself, and the king's crown is heavier than it looks. Jack Johnson, David Beckham. For Jack Johnson, it was never just about the face. It was about the life attached to it. Growing up in England, Jack didn't simply admire David Beckham's looks, he worshipped everything Beckham represented: wealth, fame, power, designer suits, celebrity friends. To Jack, Beckham wasn't a footballer, he was a formula, and Jack believed that if he could copy the outside, the inside would eventually follow. At just 20 years old, Jack had already gone under the knife multiple times, spending over $6,000 on cosmetic procedures to sharpen his jawline, adjust his features, and inch closer to Beckham's polished image. But the mirror still wasn't satisfied. Next on his list was a gastric band, not for health, but to sculpt a slimmer, more elite body. Ironically, Jack was unemployed. Each surgery pushed him deeper into debt, yet he kept going, convinced that stopping would mean failure. What made Jack's obsession darker than most was his honesty. He didn't hide his intentions. He openly admitted he didn't just want to look like Beckham, he wanted to be him. Rich, famous, surrounded by stars. The surgeries weren't about self-esteem, they were an investment in a fantasy. Friends questioned his choices, critics mocked him. But Jack saw doubt as noise standing between him and destiny. Today, Jack Johnson's transformation remains unfinished, suspended between hope and collapse. His face is changing faster than his circumstances, and the gap between who he is and who he wants to be keeps widening. In chasing David Beckham's image, Jack may have missed a brutal truth: a face can be copied, but a life cannot be transplanted. And some dreams, once surgically pursued, leave scars no surgeon can erase. Jordan James Park, Kim Kardashian. Jordan James Park didn't want inspiration. He wanted duplication. From the moment Kim Kardashian rose to global fame, Jordan became convinced that her face wasn't just beautiful, it was a passport. To attention, to relevance, to power. While millions followed Kim on social media, Jordan studied her features with surgical precision, convinced that copying them would unlock the same spotlight. This wasn't fandom, it was fixation. The transformation was extreme from the start. Jordan spent over $150,000 on cosmetic procedures, most of it poured into his lips. Injection after injection, far beyond medical reason. At one point, doctors warned that his lips were at risk of rupturing, the skin stretched so thin it could no longer hold. Only then did he stop temporarily. For a brief moment, he tried to reverse the damage, aiming for a more natural look, but the harm was already done. His face had crossed a line no filter could hide. What shocked people even more was his hair, or lack of it. In a move that baffled surgeons and viewers alike, Jordan chose to permanently remove his hair with laser treatment, leaving his head bald. The irony was impossible to ignore. Kim Kardashian was famous for her long dark hair, yet Jordan erased his entirely. The resemblance became distorted, unsettling. Not a copy, but a caricature. A reminder of what happens when obsession loses control. Today, Jordan James Park stands as one of the most disturbing examples of celebrity imitation gone wrong. His face tells a story of excess insecurity and denial. He wanted Kim Kardashian's beauty, but what he created instead was a warning. Because when the pursuit of perfection ignores reality, the result isn't transformation, it's self-destruction, written permanently into the skin. If you enjoyed today's story and want to see more cases like this, leave a 1 in the comments below. Tobias Strebel, Justin Bieber. Tobias Strebel never cared about the music. The lyrics, the fame, the screaming fans, none of that mattered. What captivated him was the face. When Justin Bieber rose to stardom as a teenage idol, Tobias saw an opportunity, not admiration, youth, symmetry, attention. He believed that Bieber's appearance alone was enough to rewrite a life, and Tobias was determined to borrow it piece by surgical piece. The transformation began in 2004 and quickly escalated. Nose jobs, facial reshaping, skin treatments. Tobias subjected himself to countless cosmetic procedures, chasing the soft, boyish features that made Justin Bieber famous. Each surgery pushed him closer to an illusion and further away from reality. Friends described him as obsessed, disconnected, consumed by mirrors and appointments. He wasn't becoming famous, he was becoming unrecognizable. Unlike many others, Tobias never found success at the end of the scalpel. There were no TV deals, no applause, no redemption arc. Instead, isolation deepened. His identity collapsed under the weight of constant comparison. He had changed his face, but his life remained the same. The dream promised transformation. What it delivered was emptiness. In 2015, Tobias Strebel was found dead in a Los Angeles hotel room. The cause, an overdose caused by a lethal mix of drugs and alcohol. His story ended quietly, without cameras, without headlines worthy of the obsession that consumed him. Tobias chased the face of Justin Bieber until there was nothing left to chase. And in the end, the most brutal truth emerged: no amount of surgery can save someone who is trying to disappear into someone else. Justin Jedlicka. Justin Jedlicka was never chasing a celebrity. He was chasing perfection, and perfection in his mind was plastic. From a young age, Justin became obsessed with the idea of the ideal male body, one without flaws, asymmetry, or age. The inspiration was unmistakable Ken: smooth skin, sharp features, permanence. While most people grow out of childhood fantasies, Justin decided to surgically lock himself into one. His first cosmetic surgery came at just 18 years old, and it didn't stop there. Over the years, Justin underwent more than 90 procedures, including 11 major surgeries. Surgeons flattened his forehead, sculpted his jaw, implanted fake biceps and abdominal muscles, and reshaped nearly every visible part of his body. The total cost climbed past $100,000, and that number kept rising. Each operation brought him closer to something unreal and further away from human imperfection. What makes Justin's case especially disturbing is his mindset. He doesn't see surgery as correction. He sees it as art. Justin openly describes his body as a sculpture in progress, something to be endlessly refined, adjusted, perfected. Pain is irrelevant. Risk is secondary. His appearance became his identity, and stopping would mean accepting limits, something he refuses to do. Financially, his transformation was sustained by a wealthy partner, removing the one barrier that forces most people to stop. Today, Justin Jedlicka is famous for what he represents: the extreme endpoint of cosmetic obsession. He achieved what he wanted: attention, shock, recognition, but at a cost that can't be measured in dollars. His face no longer ages naturally. His body no longer belongs to biology. In turning himself into Ken, Justin erased the line between person and product. leaving behind a chilling question when the transformation is finally complete. What part of the human is left untouched? Georgina Clark and Kayla Morris. This fixation didn't start with a single person, it spread through an entire household. Georgina Clark didn't merely admire Katie Price. She allowed that image to define what beauty meant inside her family. Over time, that idea was passed directly to her daughter, Kayla Morris. The exaggerated curves, dramatic lips, and headline-driven appearance of a tabloid star slowly became a shared goal. What should have been individuality turned into a joint transformation project. Approaching 40. Georgina and her young adult daughter invested more than $100,000 into cosmetic procedures, repeated lip fillers, breast surgeries, constant aesthetic adjustments. Each procedure pushed them further away from their natural looks and closer to a manufactured ideal. Their appearances began to mirror one another, blurring generational lines. Mother and daughter no longer looked related by biology, but by design. Kayla's involvement began alarmingly early. Still a teenager, she started taking on adult-oriented modeling and promotional work to help finance the surgeries for herself and for her mother. The pressure to maintain this lifestyle grew quickly. Income was tied to appearance, and appearance was tied to constant modification. Beauty became responsibility. Surgery became routine. There was little room left for choice without consequences. Today, their story is less about admiration and more about inheritance. This wasn't one person chasing a celebrity image, it was a legacy built around it. In trying to resemble Katie Price, Georgina and Kayla reshaped not only their bodies but their relationship. Jessica Alves. It started with admiration, then escalated into a full-scale reconstruction. Rodrigo Alves didn't want fame for talent or achievement, he wanted perfection. Plastic polished and permanent, inspired by Ken, Rodrigo set out to erase every trace of human imperfection from his body. Smooth skin, sharp jawline, impossible symmetry. What began as cosmetic enhancement quickly turned into a surgical crusade against nature itself. Over the years, Rodrigo underwent more than 70 procedures, spending over $500,000 in pursuit of an ideal that doesn't age, doesn't wrinkle, and doesn't exist. Nose jobs piled on top of nose jobs. Fillers, implants, liposuction, muscle sculpting. Each operation promised refinement. Each one demanded another. His face became a construction site, never finished, never stable. Surgeons warned him. Specialists hesitated. Rodrigo kept signing the consent forms. Then the body pushed back. His nose began to die. Tissue necrosis set in, starving the skin of blood. Infections followed. At one point, doctors admitted that Rodrigo was dangerously close to losing his nose entirely, or worse. Emergency reconstructive surgeries were performed just to keep his face intact. The dream of becoming Ken had crossed a terrifying threshold. The pursuit of perfection was now threatening survival. Today, Rodrigo Alves is no longer just a spectacle, he is a cautionary tale. His transformation brought global attention but also irreversible damage. He achieved recognition but at the cost of his physical stability and sense of self. In trying to become something flawless and eternal, Rodrigo learned a brutal truth. Plastic may look perfect, but the human body keeps score. And sometimes obsession doesn't just change who you are, it decides whether you make it out alive. Nanette Hammond. For Nanette Hammond, reality was never enough. While others saw Barbie as a toy, a childhood symbol meant to be outgrown, Nanette saw a destiny. Perfect hair, permanent smile, a body untouched by age, stress, or consequence. Inspired by Barbie, she made a decision that would consume decades of her life. She would turn herself into a real-life doll no matter the cost. That cost climbed quickly. Nanette spent over $450,000 on cosmetic procedures, breast augmentations, facial fillers, Botox, body contouring, constant maintenance. Surgery wasn't an event. It was a routine. Each visit to the clinic promised refinement, symmetry control. Aging became the enemy. Wrinkles were unacceptable. Natural features were liabilities. Her face and body slowly transformed into something smooth, exaggerated, and unmistakably artificial. Doctors warned her about long-term health risks. Critics questioned her choices. Nanette dismissed them all. She insisted she was happier this way, more herself than she had ever been before. Social media attention followed, feeding the transformation. Cameras loved the shock factor. Headlines reinforced the image. The more she looked like Barbie, the more the world paid attention and the harder it became to stop. Today, Nanette Hammond exists somewhere between admiration and alarm. She achieved what few dared to attempt. She made fantasy permanent. But permanence has a price. Her appearance no longer reflects time or biology, it reflects commitment to an idea that cannot evolve. In becoming Barbie, Nanette froze herself inside an image designed never to change. And the unsettling truth remains: when your identity is built on perfection, there is no room left for being human. Valeria Lukyanova. Valeria Lukyanova insists she was born this way, but the world wasn't convinced. When her photos began circulating online, people stopped asking who she was and started asking what she was. Her glassy eyes, impossibly narrow waist, porcelain skin, and frozen smile made her look less human and more manufactured. Almost instantly, she was labeled the human Barbie, a living reflection of Barbie brought into flesh. Unlike others, Valeria denied extensive surgery. She claimed her appearance was the result of genetics, makeup, and extreme discipline. But specialists pointed out signs of cosmetic intervention, facial contouring, breast enhancement, and precise alterations too exact to be natural. Beyond surgery, her lifestyle raised even more concern. Valeria followed rigid routines, restrictive diets, and intense body control practices designed to maintain a figure that defies anatomy. Her body wasn't evolving, it was being preserved. What truly separated Valeria from the rest was her belief system. She spoke openly about spirituality, claiming she was no longer fully human but a higher being meant to transcend physical needs. Food, sleep, even pain were treated as optional. The doll-like appearance was no longer just aesthetic, it became proof in her mind that she had escaped ordinary biology. Critics saw denial. Fans saw mystery. Valeria saw enlightenment. Today, Valeria Lukyanova exists in a fragile space between fantasy and reality. She achieved global recognition without ever confirming the full truth of her transformation. But whether through surgery, control, or belief, the result is the same: a woman locked inside an image designed never to age, never to bend, never to break. Ollie London. At first, it looked like devotion. Ollie London was a loud, emotional superfan of BTS, and among all the members, Jimin became the center of his universe. The voice, the softness, the sharp jawline, the flawless skin, Ollie didn't just admire it. He internalized it. Slowly, dangerously, Jimin stopped being a person and became a template. Ollie's own face began to feel temporary, incorrect, something that needed to be fixed. The surgeries came fast and didn't stop. Nose jobs, jaw reshaping, eye surgeries, fillers, skin lightening. Ollie spent over $200,000 undergoing repeated cosmetic procedures, each one bringing him closer to a vision that could never truly be reached. His face swelled, tightened, changed shape again and again. Surgeons expressed concern. The public reacted with shock. Ollie insisted he was finally becoming his true self. But the transformation wasn't just physical. Ollie began declaring himself Korean despite being British by birth. He blurred the line between admiration and identity, between fandom and self-erasure. Online attention exploded, some supportive, many alarmed. Each headline reinforced the obsession. Each reaction pushed him further. What started as love for an idol turned into a public unraveling, played out in real time. Today, Ollie London stands as one of the most controversial examples of idol worship taken to its extreme. His face tells a story of excess confusion and desperation to belong to something larger than himself. In trying to become Jimin, Ollie didn't just change his appearance, he fractured his identity. And his story leaves behind a disturbing truth: when admiration turns into imitation, the cost isn't just cosmetic, it's existential. It's existential. It's existential. It's existential. Georgina Clark and Kayla Morris. This fixation didn't start with a single person, it spread through an entire household. Georgina Clark didn't merely admire Katie Price. She allowed that image to define what beauty meant inside her family. Over time, that idea was passed directly to her daughter, Kayla Morris. The exaggerated curves, dramatic lips, and headline-driven appearance of a tabloid star slowly became a shared goal. What should have been individuality turned into a joint transformation project. Approaching 40. Georgina and her young adult daughter invested more than $100,000 into cosmetic procedures, repeated lip fillers, breast surgeries, constant aesthetic adjustments. Each procedure pushed them further away from their natural looks and closer to a manufactured ideal. Their appearances began to mirror one another, blurring generational lines. Mother and daughter no longer looked related by biology but by design. Kayla's involvement began alarmingly early. Still a teenager, she started taking on adult-oriented modeling and promotional work to help finance the surgeries for herself and for her mother. The pressure to maintain this lifestyle grew quickly. Income was tied to appearance, and appearance was tied to constant modification. Beauty became responsibility. Surgery became routine. There was little room left for choice without consequences. Today, their story is less about admiration and more about inheritance. This wasn't one person chasing a celebrity image, it was a legacy built around it. In trying to resemble Katie Price, Georgina and Kayla reshaped not only their bodies but their relationship. Jessica Alves. It started with admiration, then escalated into a full-scale reconstruction. Rodrigo Alves didn't want fame for talent or achievement, he wanted perfection. Plastic polished and permanent, inspired by Ken, Rodrigo set out to erase every trace of human imperfection from his body. Smooth skin, sharp jawline, impossible symmetry. What began as cosmetic enhancement quickly turned into a surgical crusade against nature itself. Over the years, Rodrigo underwent more than 70 procedures, spending over $500,000 in pursuit of an ideal that doesn't age, doesn't wrinkle, and doesn't exist. Nose jobs piled on top of nose jobs. Fillers, implants, liposuction, muscle sculpting. Each operation promised refinement. Each one demanded another. His face became a construction site, never finished, never stable. Surgeons warned him. Specialists hesitated. Rodrigo kept signing the consent forms. Then the body pushed back. His nose began to die. Tissue necrosis set in, starving the skin of blood. Infections followed. At one point, doctors admitted that Rodrigo was dangerously close to losing his nose entirely, or worse. What happened to the most beautiful faces of 1980s Hollywood? They were once untouchable icons, symbols of perfection frozen on magazine covers and movie screens. But by 2026, time pressure and Hollywood's brutal standards have rewritten their stories. In this video, we reveal 15 of the most beautiful actresses from the 80s who have aged badly through shocking transformations, rumors, and choices that changed everything. This isn't nostalgia, it's the dark side of fame. Cher. For more than 6 decades, Cher has existed beyond eras, beyond trends, beyond the limits that quietly end most careers. With her impossibly long hair, sculpted cheekbones, and a voice that could cut through generations, she wasn't just a pop star, she was a spectacle of endurance. From her early days alongside Sonny Bono to her explosive rise as a solo icon, Cher mastered the art of staying ahead of the moment. Music, fashion, television, film, she conquered them all, building an image so powerful it felt untouchable, almost eternal. But even goddesses are not immune to Hollywood's cruel mirror. As time passed, whispers followed her through backstage corridors and glossy magazine spreads. Cher herself acknowledged undergoing cosmetic procedures, rhinoplasties, breast implants, and other enhancements, insisting she was never obsessed, only honest. Still, the changes were visible. The face that once carried softness and mystery grew sharper, more sculpted, more deliberate. Critics debated endlessly, fans dissected every appearance, and yet Cher remained unmoved. She never denied herself, never apologized, never pretended aging didn't exist. She simply refused to let it define her. And while others faded quietly, Cher stayed luminous by choice. Well into her 70s, she continued to dominate stages draped in extravagant costumes, delivering performances charged with confidence and command. She sang her classics, stunned audiences in Las Vegas residencies, and proved that relevance is not granted by youth, but seized through will. Cher stands today not as a symbol of untouched beauty, but as proof of ownership of body image and legacy. Her power lies not in resisting time, but in bending it to her presence, leaving behind a truth Hollywood can never erase: longevity, when claimed unapologetically, is its own kind of beauty. Madonna. In the 1980s, Madonna didn't rise to fame, she took it hostage. With lace gloves, crucifixes, and a stare sharpened by ambition, she rewrote the rules of pop stardom in real time. She wasn't just performing songs, she was performing defiance. Every movement, every reinvention, every provocation felt intentional, almost strategic, as if she understood something others didn't, that in Hollywood, visibility is survival. Her beauty wasn't delicate, it was confrontational, fearless, a weapon wrapped in glamour. For a generation, Madonna wasn't merely admired. She was studied, copied, worshipped. But time that silent rival eventually arrived, as it always does. And in an industry that punishes women for aging while pretending not to, the pressure became relentless. Whispers began circulating quietly at first, then louder about fillers, cosmetic procedures, transformations that altered the face once so familiar. Photos sparked shock debate, even discomfort. Some said she was no longer recognizable. Others defended her fiercely, arguing that Madonna had simply done what she always had, refused to obey expectations. Whether praised or criticized, her appearance once again became a battleground, proof that even legends are not spared from Hollywood's obsession with eternal youth. Yet while the world fixated on her face, Madonna kept moving forward, still touring, still commanding stages, still provoking headlines. Even in her 60s, she refused the role of nostalgia act or fading icon. She chose noise over silence, controversy over disappearance. In a culture terrified of aging women, Madonna remains a contradiction, constantly changing, endlessly discussed, impossible to ignore. And perhaps that is her final unsettling power, not the transformations themselves, but the question they leave behind. When reinvention becomes a way of life, is it freedom or a fight against something far deeper? Love her fearless reinvention and refusal to disappear. Comment 1 if you admire Madonna's transformation. Comment 0 if you believe Hollywood pushed her too far. Michelle Pfeiffer. In the 1980s and 90s, Michelle Pfeiffer didn't just light up the screen, she glowed. There was something almost untouchable about her beauty, classic, yet dangerous, delicate, yet commanding. From Scarface to the Fabulous Baker Boys, her presence carried a quiet magnetism that pulled audiences in without effort. Those icy blue eyes, that porcelain skin, that elegance that felt borrowed from another era of Hollywood, she became the embodiment of cinematic perfection. Yet what truly set her apart was not her face, but her restraint. She never begged for attention. The camera followed her because it had no other choice. As the years passed, Hollywood waited for the usual spectacle, the drastic reinvention, the frozen face, the denial of time. But Pfeiffer took a different route. She openly acknowledged skincare treatments and subtle, non-invasive procedures while avoiding the extreme transformations that swallowed so many of her contemporaries. Time left its marks as it always does, but it did not erase her. Instead, it softened her image, replacing youthful radiance with something rarer in the industry: quiet authority. In a culture obsessed with erasing age, her decision felt almost rebellious. For a time, she stepped away from the spotlight, choosing family over relentless exposure. And when she returned in films like Mother and Ant-Man and the Wasp, it wasn't as a relic, but as a reminder. Michelle Pfeiffer proved that disappearing does not mean surrender and aging does not mean decline. She re-emerged, not chasing her past, but standing firmly in her present, carrying the same elegance that once defined her, now reinforced by confidence and control. In an industry terrified of time, she remains golden, not because she resisted it, but because she allowed it to refine her. Jessica Lange. In the 1980s, Jessica Lange represented a different kind of Hollywood beauty, one that didn't ask for approval. With her striking bone structure, piercing gaze, and an intensity that felt almost dangerous, she commanded the screen in films like Tootsie and Frances. She wasn't polished to please, she was powerful to confront. Lange didn't simply act, she inhabited. Every role carried weight, pain, and intelligence, making it clear that her allure came not from symmetry or softness, but from depth. She was beauty sharpened by truth. As the years passed, Lange made a choice that quietly defied Hollywood logic. While others chased eternal youth through extreme procedures, she largely allowed time to leave its mark. There were whispers of subtle touch-ups, but nothing designed to erase who she was. Wrinkles appeared, lines deepened, and with them came criticism, the kind reserved for women who refused to pretend aging is optional. Yet Lang never chased validation. Instead, she leaned into roles that demanded gravitas, not perfection, choosing substance over surface in an industry that rarely rewards such restraint. Her career found renewed fire with American Horror Story, where she mesmerized a new generation as ruthless, tragic, unforgettable women. On screen, she proved something Hollywood prefers to forget: talent ages better than beauty ever could. Even in her 70s, Jessica Lange remains unignorable, not because she resisted time, but because she turned it into an ally. Her legacy stands as quiet defiance, a reminder that true power doesn't come from looking young, but from having nothing left to prove. Jessica Lange's appearance changed, but her power remained. Do you see her transformation as strength, authenticity, or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments. Goldie Hawn. There was a time when Goldie Hawn seemed to personify happiness itself. With her sunlit hair, infectious laugh, and boundless energy, she became Hollywood's definition of warmth. From Private Benjamin to Overboard, she didn't just star in films, she lifted them, wrapping comedy in charm and vulnerability. Audiences didn't merely watch Goldie Hawn, they felt better because she was there. She was the girl next door, the woman who made joy look effortless, as if optimism were something you could learn just by watching her smile. But as the years passed, the narrative shifted, as it so often does with women in Hollywood. Conversations began to circle not around her timing or talent, but around her face. There were whispers of cosmetic tweaks, debates over whether she had intervened or simply aged naturally. Some claimed she had tried to preserve her youthful glow, others insisted she embraced time without resistance. The truth, as always, lived somewhere in between: a woman navigating an industry that never stops watching, measuring, comparing. Yet no matter how her appearance changed, one thing remained untouched: her spirit. The laughter was still real, the warmth still unmistakable. What truly sets Goldie Hawn apart is that she never allowed the spotlight to define her worth. Beyond acting, she devoted herself to philanthropy, mental health advocacy, and children's education through her Mind Up program, quietly reshaping lives far from red carpets. Her enduring partnership with Kurt Russell only reinforced her refusal to follow Hollywood scripts, choosing authenticity over convention. Today, Goldie Hawn remains beloved not because she chased youth, but because she carried joy forward with grace. In a town obsessed with surfaces, she proved that light, genuine human light, ages better than beauty ever could. Diane Keaton. From the moment Diane Keaton stepped into Hollywood, it was clear she was playing a different game. While the industry chased curves, glamour, and carefully polished femininity, Keaton arrived in oversized suits, ties, and wide-brimmed hats, and somehow made them revolutionary. Her breakout in Annie Hall didn't just earn awards, it rewired what female charisma could look like. Awkward, intelligent, confident without seduction, she became an icon by refusing to perform beauty the way Hollywood demanded. As the years passed, Keaton made a decision that felt almost radical in an industry built on denial. She did not chase youth. She did not freeze her face. She did not disappear into surgical reinvention. Instead, she allowed time to do what time always does. Wrinkles came. Her face changed. And, predictably, the comments followed. Critics pointed out how different she looked, as if difference were failure. Keaton's response was characteristic humor, indifference, and an unshakable sense of self. She never defended herself because she never believed she was on trial. Rather than fight the surface, Diane Keaton invested in substance. She continued acting, directing, writing, creating characters who reflected strength, independence, and lived experience. Her books on self-acceptance and personal growth resonated deeply, especially with women who saw in her a rare mirror, someone aging without apology. Even into her 70s, Keaton remains visible, relevant, unmistakably herself. In a town obsessed with erasing time, she chose to wear it openly, proving that true style isn't about staying young, it's about never abandoning who you are. Brooke Shields. In the early 1980s, Brooke Shields wasn't just famous, she was inescapable. Towering, wide-eyed, with impossibly thick brows and a gaze that seemed far too mature for her age, she became the embodiment of controversial beauty. From the Blue Lagoon to the now legendary Calvin Klein ads, her image was everywhere, frozen in time as the ultimate symbol of youthful perfection. Hollywood didn't simply admire her beauty, it consumed it, packaged it, and sold it back to the world as an ideal no one else could ever reach. But growing up under that microscope came at a cost. As Shields transitioned from child star to adult actress, the pressure intensified. The industry that once worshipped her youth now demanded that she preserve it forever. Over the years, whispers followed her subtle procedures. Small refinements, careful maintenance of the face the world refused to forget. Yet, unlike many of her peers, Brooke Shields never allowed those rumors to define her. She understood early that perfection was a trap and that surviving Hollywood required more than just a beautiful face. What ultimately reshaped her legacy wasn't how she aged, but how she spoke. Shields became an outspoken advocate for mental health and self-acceptance, openly sharing her struggle with postpartum depression at a time when silence was expected. She shifted the conversation from appearance to honesty, from fantasy to reality. Today, Brooke Shields stands not as the flawless image Hollywood once tried to preserve, but as something far more enduring, a woman who reclaimed her narrative, proving that true power begins the moment beauty stops being the only thing people see. Sally Field. For decades, Sally Field embodied something rare in Hollywood sincerity. From her early days as America's sweetheart in Gidget and the Flying Nun to her emotionally shattering performances in Steel Magnolias and Forrest Gump, she brought warmth that never felt manufactured. Her smile wasn't an accessory, it was an extension of her humanity. Audiences trusted her, believed her, and followed her through every chapter because she felt real in an industry built on illusion. As time passed, Field made a choice that quietly unsettled Hollywood. She did not wage war against aging. She admitted to minor touch-ups but refused to surrender her face to extreme procedures. Lines appeared. Her features softened. And with that came criticism, the kind reserved for women who dare to look their age in a system that treats youth as currency. She was compared, dissected, and judged against peers who chose surgical preservation. But Sally Field never retreated. She stood firm, letting her face tell its story rather than erase it. What endured was her talent, steady, undeniable, immune to trends. While others fought time, Field focused on purpose, continuing her work as an actress and activist, lending her voice to causes that mattered far beyond the screen. In doing so, she redefined rebellion in Hollywood not through shock or reinvention, but through authenticity. Sally Field remains proof that strength doesn't always shout, sometimes it simply refuses to lie. Meg Ryan. For a long stretch of time, Meg Ryan was romance. With her tousled blonde hair, open smile, and an effortless vulnerability that felt almost intimate, she became the face of love stories an entire generation believed in. In films like When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, and You've Got Mail, she wasn't playing a fantasy, she was playing possibility. The girl next door who felt reachable, human, and real. Her charm wasn't polished or intimidating, it was disarming. She made audiences believe that love could happen in bookstores, cafes, and chance conversations. But Hollywood's affection is conditional, especially for women. As the 2000s arrived, the tone changed. Meg Ryan's face, once celebrated for its natural warmth, became the subject of relentless scrutiny. Rumors spread about cosmetic procedures, fillers, Botox, altered features that softened the expressions audiences once recognized instantly. Photos sparked headlines, headlines fueled judgment, and judgment slowly reshaped her public image. The same industry that built her up now spoke of her in past tense as if her worth had been tied exclusively to a frozen moment in time. As offers faded and criticism grew louder, Ryan chose retreat over desperation. She stepped away from the spotlight, focusing on her family, and later turning toward directing and personal projects. She no longer chased the roles that once defined her, nor did she attempt to reclaim the title Hollywood had quietly taken away. Yet her legacy remains untouched. Those films still play. Those moments still resonate. Meg Ryan may no longer be Hollywood's romantic ideal, but she remains something far more permanent. The woman who made love stories feel honest long after the industry moved on. Faye Dunaway. There was a time when Faye Dunaway seemed carved from old Hollywood marble-sharp cheekbones, a piercing gaze, and a presence so commanding it could silence a room. In Bonnie and Clyde, Chinatown, and Network, she didn't just play powerful women, she embodied them. Cold, elegant, formidable. Her beauty wasn't soft or inviting, it was intimidating, almost regal. Dunaway carried herself like someone who knew she belonged at the top, and for years no one dared question it. But Hollywood's reverence is fleeting, especially when age enters the frame. As the years passed, attention slowly shifted from her performances to her appearance. Rumors of multiple facelifts, Botox, and cosmetic procedures followed her relentlessly, with critics claiming her face had changed beyond recognition. The conversation grew cruel, often reducing a legendary career to before and after comparisons. At the same time, stories circulated about her difficult temperament on set, narratives that painted her as demanding, uncompromising, hard to handle. To some, it was the mark of a woman refusing to relinquish control in an industry that punishes female authority. To others, it was evidence of a star struggling to hold on to power. Yet none of the noise can erase what remains undeniable. Faye Dunaway won an Academy Award. She defined an era of cinema. Her performances still command respect long after the headlines fade. While she has stepped away from the spotlight in recent years, her legacy endures not as a cautionary tale, but as a reflection of Hollywood's double standard. Dunaway was once untouchable, and in many ways she still is, because legends are not undone by time, only misunderstood by it. Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith seemed destined for Hollywood long before she ever stepped onto a set. The daughter of screen legend Tippi Hedren, she carried old Hollywood genes wrapped in a distinctly modern allure. When Working Girl exploded onto screens, Griffith became the embodiment of ambition and vulnerability, her husky voice and luminous presence earning her a Golden Globe and an Academy Award nomination. She was radiant, relatable, and impossibly watchable, a star who felt both glamorous and human at the same time. But fame did not arrive gently. As her career soared, her personal life unfolded under relentless scrutiny. Marriages, divorces, tabloid headlines, and well-documented struggles with addiction turned her into a public spectacle as much as a respected actress. Then came the whispers about cosmetic procedures. Griffith never denied them. In fact, she was disarmingly honest, later admitting that she had gone too far in her attempt to maintain a youthful appearance in an industry that quietly demands it. When criticism turned brutal, she made the rare move of publicly acknowledging regret and taking steps to reverse some of the changes. What makes Melanie Griffith's story linger isn't the transformation itself, but the candor that followed. She spoke openly about Hollywood's suffocating obsession with youth and the emotional toll it takes on women whose faces are treated like careers. Her beauty may have changed, but her honesty stripped away the illusion, revealing the cost behind the glamour. Griffith's legacy is not one of perfection preserved, but of survival. A woman who lived through the pressure, owned her choices, and remained standing long after the spotlight turned unforgiving. Heather Locklear. In the late 1980s and 90s, Heather Locklear was the definition of television perfection. Golden hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile engineered to dominate prime time, she ruled the small screen through Dynasty and Melrose Place. She wasn't just popular, she was everywhere. Locklear embodied the California dream, glamorous yet approachable, confident yet charming, a woman audiences wanted to be and be with. For years, her image felt untouchable, frozen in glossy magazine covers and weekly ratings triumphs. But behind the polished surface, the story darkened. As the spotlight intensified, so did the pressure. Over time, headlines shifted from her roles to her reality struggles with addiction, battles with mental health arrests, and repeated stints in rehabilitation. Alongside these revelations came whispers about cosmetic procedures, about attempts to preserve the look that once defined her fame. Photos circulated, comparisons multiplied, and the public fascination grew harsher, as if watching a transformation they didn't know how to process. Yet Heather Locklear's story is not one of erasure, it is one of endurance. In recent years, she has stepped away from constant exposure, focusing on recovery and stability rather than applause. While she may no longer command television the way she once did, her cultural imprint remains undeniable. Locklear stands as a reminder of how quickly Hollywood builds its icons and how slowly it learns to protect them, leaving behind a legacy shaped as much by resilience as by beauty. Kathleen Turner. In the 1980s, Kathleen Turner radiated a kind of sensual authority Hollywood rarely knows how to handle. With her deep, unmistakable voice and a gaze that could command a room, she electrified the screen in Body Heat, Romancing the Stone, and Peggy Sue Got Married. She was not delicate, not ornamental. She was bold, intelligent, and unapologetically adult. Turner didn't just play strong women, she was one embodying desire and dominance with a confidence that felt dangerous in an industry more comfortable with softness. Then quietly, everything shifted. In the 1990s, Turner was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, a painful autoimmune disease that altered her body and limited her mobility. The medications were harsh, the side effects visible, and the weight gain became impossible to ignore. Hollywood, ever impatient with complexity, responded with indifference. Roles disappeared. Headlines grew cruel. As her appearance changed, the industry that once celebrated her sensuality turned its back, as if illness were a personal failure rather than a battle being fought in silence. But Kathleen Turner did not vanish. She confronted her diagnosis publicly, spoke honestly about her struggles, including periods of alcohol dependence, and rebuilt her life on her own terms. She shifted toward theater voice work and character roles, later returning to television in projects like Friends and Californication. Her presence today is not defined by youth or illusion, but by resilience. Turner stands as living proof that real strength is not about preserving an image, it is about surviving the moment when that image no longer protects you and choosing to remain standing anyway. Linda Hamilton. When Linda Hamilton transformed into Sarah Connor, she didn't just redefine the action heroine, she shattered the mold completely. In The Terminator and Terminator 2, her muscular frame, hardened stare, and relentless intensity rewrote what strength looked like on screen. She wasn't decorative, she wasn't secondary, she was survival itself, forged in sweat, discipline, and fury. For audiences, Linda Hamilton became more than an actress. She became a symbol of resilience, a woman who looked like she could outfight destiny. But off-screen, her battles were far more brutal and far less cinematic. For years, Hamilton struggled with bipolar disorder, a condition that brought emotional extremes, instability, and periods of self-destructive behavior. Fame only amplified the chaos. At times, the pressure of Hollywood and the weight of her own mind collided, pushing her into darkness few ever saw. Unlike many in the industry, she did not mask her pain with perfection. She faced it slowly and painfully, seeking treatment and learning to live with a condition that never truly disappears. What makes Linda Hamilton's story extraordinary is not her refusal to age, but her refusal to pretend. She never chased artificial youth through cosmetic extremes. Instead, she allowed time and experience to carve her features honestly. When she returned in Terminator Dark Fate decades later, she didn't try to recreate the woman she once was. She appeared as something stronger, older, scarred, and unyielding. Linda Hamilton stands today not as a flawless icon, but as a survivor whose power comes from endurance, truth, and the quiet courage to keep going when the real enemy is invisible. Linda Hamilton faced real battles and never hid her scars. Comment too if you respect her strength, and thank you for watching all the way to the near end of this video. Tara Reid. At the turn of the late 1990s, Tara Reid looked like Hollywood's next eternal blonde. Fresh-faced, carefree, and effortlessly charming, she became the symbol of youthful fun in films like American Pie and The Big Lebowski. With her sun-kissed hair and easy smile, she embodied the fantasy of endless summers and late-night laughter. Fame came fast, and with it, invitations, attention, and a nightlife that quickly became as famous as her roles. For a moment, it seemed the spotlight would never move on, but Hollywood's glow can be blinding, especially for someone so young. As the years passed, Reid became a tabloid fixture, her party lifestyle dissected with ruthless fascination. Then came the surgeries. In an attempt to maintain her image, she underwent cosmetic procedures, liposuction, and breast augmentation that, according to widely circulated accounts, went terribly wrong. The results were visible, uneven, and impossible to hide. Overnight, her body became public property, analyzed and mocked in before and after photos that reduced a rising actress to a cautionary headline. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Roles dried up. Trust from studios faded. While she later found cult recognition through projects like Sharknado, it never fully restored what had been lost. In recent years, Tara Reid has spoken openly about the harsh realities of fame and the mistakes made under intense pressure. Her story stands as one of Hollywood's harshest lessons: how quickly the industry can elevate a young woman and how mercilessly it can abandon her once the illusion cracks. If this video surprised you, disturbed you, or made you see Hollywood differently, don't forget to like to support the channel. Subscribe for more untold stories behind fame and beauty, and turn on notifications so you never miss what the industry prefers to keep hidden. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for